I spent 35 years being invisible in my own family. On my birthday, the one day that was supposed to be mine, I watched my mother hand my sister a Hermes bag and announce they were paying for her grad school and buying her a house. The room went dead silent. Forks froze mid-air. My father nodded like this was perfectly normal. "We invest in the child with a future," Mum said, her voice slicing through the air like a blade. "The one who deserves it." Lily smirked. 23 relatives stared at their plates. No one said a word in my defense. I felt the heat crawl up my neck. The humiliation burned hotter than the candles on a cake no one had bothered to cut. For 35 years, I had built myself from nothing. Double shifts, sleepless nights, a career forged in silence while they poured everything into my perfect little sister. But they didn't know what I knew. They hadn't heard about the $30 million contract sitting in my inbox. So I smiled and said 7 words that made my sister's face go white. "Have you ever been invisible to the people who were supposed to love you most?" My name is Madison Sharp. I am 35 years old and I work as a pharmaceutical brand strategist, helping Fortune 500 companies build their market presence. I have spent the last decade building a career in silence, far from the family that never believed I would amount to anything. The invitation came 3 weeks before my birthday. A rare phone call from my mother, her voice casual, almost careless, saying they wanted to celebrate together as a family. I should have known better. But some part of me, the part that still remembered being a little girl, waiting for her mother's approval, said yes. I pulled into the driveway of my parents' house in suburban Ohio on a Saturday afternoon in late September. The maple tree in the front yard had turned gold, and the air smelled like fallen leaves and something baking inside. Apple pie, my mother's signature. For a moment, standing on the porch, I almost felt like I was coming home. Then I stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was the wall in the living room. It used to hold family photos, a mix of Lily and me through the years. Now it was a shrine to my younger sister. Lily's college graduation, Lily's sorority formal, Lily shaking hands with some professor at an academic conference. There were at least a dozen frames, maybe more. I scanned every inch of that wall, searching for my face. I found nothing. Not a single photograph of me remained. I stood there longer than I should have, staring at that wall, feeling something cold settle in my chest. The smell of apple pie drifted from the kitchen, sweet and familiar, but the house felt like it belonged to strangers. Relatives had already gathered in the dining room. Aunts, uncles, cousins I barely recognized. They greeted me with polite nods, the kind you give to someone you are obligated to acknowledge, but do not particularly care about. My mother waved from across the room without getting up. My father glanced at me briefly, then returned his conversation with my uncle. Only one person crossed the room to greet me properly. Aunt Ruth, my mother's younger sister, wrapped her arms around me and held on tight. She smelled like lavender and warmth, and when she pulled back, her eyes were soft with something that looked like sadness. She leaned close to my ear and whispered, "I'm glad you came, sweetheart." It was such a small thing, those 5 words. But in that cold room, full of indifferent faces, they felt like a lifeline. Dinner began and the conversation flowed around me like I was not there. My mother talked about Lily's graduate program. My father talked about Lily's new apartment. Lily herself sat across from me looking polished and confident, her smile never quite reaching her eyes when she glanced in my direction. Then, just as the main course was being cleared, my mother stood up and clinked her glass. The room fell silent. "Before we have dessert," she announced, "we have a special surprise." My father reached under the table and pulled out a large box wrapped in gold paper. He handed it to Lily. Not to me, to Lily. On my birthday. Lily opened it slowly, dragging out the moment. Inside was a Hermes bag, the kind that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She gasped, clutching it to her chest. Then my mother handed her an envelope. Plane tickets. A European vacation. The table was silent. I could feel 23 pairs of eyes avoiding mine. My mother smiled at Lily and said the words I will never forget. We invest in the child with a future, the one who deserves it. My father nodded. He did not look at me. Lily smirked, running her fingers over the leather of her new bag. Something shifted inside me then. The old Madison would have swallowed this moment, smiled politely, and cried later in private. But I was not the old Madison anymore. I looked at my mother, my voice calm and steady. "You haven't heard about my $30 million contract yet, have you?" The words hung in the air like smoke. $30 million. I watched the colour drain from my mother's face, watched my father's hand freeze halfway to his water glass, watched my sister's smirk dissolve into something sharp and ugly. For 3 full seconds, no one breathed. The only sound was the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, steady and indifferent to the bomb I had just dropped on my own birthday dinner. In that silence, my mind drifted backward without permission. I was 10 years old again, sitting alone at the kitchen table on my birthday morning. The house was empty. My mother had taken Lily to a piano competition 2 hours away, and my father was supposed to be at work. There was no cake, no balloons, no wrapped presents waiting on the counter. I remember staring at the calendar on the wall, checking the date over and over, wondering if somehow I had gotten it wrong. Maybe my birthday was tomorrow. Maybe I had miscounted. But the calendar did not lie. It was September 23rd, and everyone had forgotten. I sat at that table for a long time, feeling something inside me go quiet and small. Then, the back door opened and my father walked in. He looked tired, still wearing his work clothes, and in his hand was a single cupcake from the grocery store bakery. It had pink frosting and a single candle stuck in the top. He sat down across from me, lit the candle with a kitchen match, and whispered, "I'm sorry, Maddie. Make a wish." I blew out that candle and wished for my mother to love me the way she loved Lily. 25 years later, I was still waiting. The memory dissolved as Lily's voice cut through the room. She pushed back from the table so hard her chair scraped against the hardwood floor, the sound sharp and grating. Her face had turned red, and her eyes were wild with something between disbelief and fury. "What contract?" she demanded. "What are you talking about? Are you seriously making this up right now? At dinner, to ruin my moment." Her moment. Even now, even when I had finally spoken up, she could only see it through the lens of herself. This was my birthday dinner. The gifts had been for her. The celebration had been for her. And somehow, my announcement was still an attack on her. I did not respond. I simply looked at her, keeping my expression neutral, letting the silence speak for me. It was a trick I had learned in business. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. My mother recovered faster than I expected. She straightened in her chair, smoothed the napkin in her lap, and fixed me with a look I knew well. It was the look she gave me when I was 14 and told her I wanted to apply to an out-of-state college. The look she gave me when I was 22 and said I was moving to Chicago. The look that said I was being ridiculous and she was embarrassed to be associated with me. "Madison," she said, her voice cool and measured, "please do not embarrass yourself in front of the family. We both know you work some small job, consulting or marketing or whatever it is you do. There is no need to invent stories for attention." Small job. The words landed like a slap. I had spent 12 years building my career. I had worked with pharmaceutical companies that operated in dozens of countries. I had advised executives who managed budgets larger than the entire net worth of everyone in this room combined. And to my mother, it was still a small job. Something vague and unimpressive. Something not worth remembering. I looked around the table at my relatives. Most of them were staring at their plates, clearly uncomfortable. Uncle Harold was studying his mashed potatoes like they contained the secrets of the universe. Cousin Patricia was pretending to check something on her phone. No one wanted to be in the middle of this. No one wanted to take sides. But then I noticed Aunt Ruth. She was sitting at the far end of the table, her hands folded calmly in front of her. She was not looking away like the others. She was watching me with an expression I could not quite read. There was something in her eyes, a glimmer of something that looked almost like pride. And at the corner of her mouth, just barely visible, was the hint of a smile. It was small, private, like she knew something the rest of the room did not. Like she had been waiting for this moment. Our eyes met for just a second. She gave me the tiniest nod, so slight that no one else would have noticed. It felt like encouragement, like permission. Lily was still standing, her voice rising. This is insane. You cannot just walk in here and make up some ridiculous number to get attention. $30 million. Do you even hear yourself? That is not how the real world works, Madison. Sit down, Lily, my father said quietly. It was the first thing he had said since my announcement. His voice was tired, defeated. He still would not look at me. Lily ignored him. She turned to our mother, gesturing at me with one perfectly manicured hand. Are you going to let her do this? She is ruining everything. She always does this. She always has to make everything about herself. The irony was so thick I almost laughed. Almost. But I held it in, kept my composure, kept my eyes on my mother. She stood slowly, placing both hands flat on the table. The room went quiet again. When she spoke, her voice had turned to ice. Madison, I do not know what kind of game you think you are playing, but this is my house, and I will not tolerate lies at my dinner table. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes locked on mine. So, if you are going to make claims like that, you had better be prepared to back them up. She paused, and the silence stretched between us like a wire pulled tight. Prove it, she said, or stop lying in my house. Prove it. The challenge hung between us, my mother's eyes daring me to back down the way I always had before. She expected me to stammer, to apologize, to admit I had exaggerated. She expected me to shrink back into the quiet, invisible daughter she had always known. But that daughter had died a long time ago, somewhere between working double shifts at a college diner and closing my first major consulting deal at 3 a.m. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. The room watched in tense silence as I unlocked the screen and navigated to my email. I found the message I was looking for, the one that had arrived just 10 days ago and changed everything. I held the phone up so my mother could see it clearly. This is a contract confirmation from Meridian Pharmaceuticals, I said, my voice steady. They are one of the largest pharmaceutical corporations in North America. This email confirms a 3-year brand strategy consulting agreement. The total contract value is $30 million. My mother squinted at the screen, her expression tight. I watched her eyes move across the text, taking in the corporate letterhead, the official language, the signature line at the bottom. The email was detailed and formal, full of legal terms and specific deliverables. It was not the kind of thing you could throw together in 5 minutes to impress your family at dinner. What exactly do you do? Uncle Robert asked from the end of the table. His voice was genuinely curious, not accusatory. He had always been one of the quieter members of the family, the type who observed more than he spoke. I lowered my phone and turned to face him. I am a brand strategist. I work with pharmaceutical companies to help them build and position their products in the market. When a company develops a new medication, they need more than just good science. They need a story. They need a way to communicate what their product does, why it matters, who it helps. That is what I create for them. I paused, letting the words settle. Most of my relatives looked confused, but they were listening. For once, they were actually listening to me. I started in marketing right out of college, I continued, entry-level, answering phones and organising files. But I worked my way up. I studied the industry. I learned how pharmaceutical branding works, how to navigate FDA regulations, how to communicate complex medical information in ways that resonate with doctors and patients. Over the past 12 years, I've worked with some of the biggest names in the industry, Fortune 500 companies, global brands. This contract with Meridian is the largest of my career, but it is not my first major deal. It is just the one that finally made me impossible to ignore. The room was quiet. I could feel the shift in the atmosphere, the way people were looking at me differently now, not with the polite disinterest I was used to, but with something closer to surprise. Maybe even respect, but Lily was not ready to accept it. "Anyone can fake an email," she said, her voice sharp and dismissive. She crossed her arms over her chest, her new Hermes bag forgotten on the table beside her. "You could have made that up in 10 minutes, put together some fake letterhead, typed up some official-sounding words. It does not prove anything." I looked at my sister for a long moment. Her face was flushed, her jaw tight. She was not just skeptical. She was afraid that everything she believed about herself and about me was wrong. Afraid that the pedestal she had stood on her entire life was not as solid as she thought. "The email includes a direct contact number for Meridian's legal department," I said calmly. "You are welcome to call them yourself and verify. I can also show you the wire transfer confirmation from the initial signing bonus. $200,000 deposited into my account last week." Lily opened her mouth, then closed it again. She had no response. Aunt Ruth spoke for the first time since the confrontation began. "Madison, I always knew you were doing well. You never talked about it much, but I could tell." Her voice was warm, and there was that same quiet pride in her eyes that I had noticed earlier. "I am glad you finally told everyone." Her words meant more to me than she probably knew. In a room full of people who had overlooked me for 35 years, she had seen me. She had always seen me. Uncle Harold cleared his throat awkwardly. He was my father's older brother, a man who had always gone along with whatever the family consensus was. "Madison," he said slowly, "why did we not know about any of this? Your career, your success? Why did you never tell us?" It was a fair question, and I had thought about the answer many times over the years. I turned to look directly at my mother, holding her gaze as I spoke. "Because no one ever asked." The words landed like stones dropped into still water. I watched the ripples spread across my mother's face, the flicker of something that might have been guilt or might have been anger. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. "I called home every month for years," I continued. "Every conversation was about Lily, her grades, her achievements, her problems. When I tried to talk about my work, I was interrupted or ignored. Eventually, I stopped trying. I realized that this family had decided a long time ago who the successful daughter was going to be, and nothing I did would ever change that. So I stopped seeking approval. I focused on building something real, something that belonged only to me." The silence that followed was heavy and uncomfortable. Relatives shifted in their seats, avoiding eye contact with each other. My mother's face had gone pale. My father was staring at the tablecloth like he wished he could disappear into it. Then, without warning, my father pushed back his chair and stood up. The sudden movement startled everyone. He looked at me, his expression unreadable, and when he spoke, his voice was tight and controlled. "Madison, we need a private word. Now." I followed my father down the hallway toward his study, my mother close behind us. The sounds of the dining room faded as we walked, the murmur of confused relatives discussing what had just happened growing quieter with each step. My father opened the study door and gestured for me to enter. The room smelled like old books and furniture polish unchanged from my childhood. He closed the door behind my mother with a soft click that somehow felt louder than it should have. My mother did not waste any time. She did not offer me a seat. She did not congratulate me on the contract. She did not ask a single question about my work or my life or how I had built something so significant without anyone in the family knowing. Instead, she crossed her arms and looked at me with an expression that was all business. "Lily is having financial difficulties," she said flatly. "Serious ones. Her graduate program is expensive and she has been struggling to keep up, Now that you apparently have money, you should help your sister. It is the right thing to do." I stared at her, waiting for something more. A word of pride, perhaps. A flicker of maternal warmth. Some acknowledgement that her eldest daughter had just revealed a career achievement most people only dream about. But there was nothing. Her face was closed, her tone matter-of-fact. I was not her daughter in this moment. I was a problem to be solved, a resource to be tapped. "What financial difficulties?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "You just gave her a Hermes bag. You announced you are paying for her graduate school and buying her a house. That does not sound like someone who is struggling." My mother waved her hand dismissively, as if my question was an irritating distraction. "That is different. Those are investments in her future. I am talking about her day-to-day expenses, credit cards, living costs. Things have gotten out of hand, and she needs help getting back on track. And you want me to provide that help. You are her sister. Family helps family. That is how it works." I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Family helps family. How many times had I needed help over the years? How many times had I called home hoping for support, for encouragement, for even the smallest gesture of care? And how many times had I been told that I needed to figure things out on my own, that they could not afford to help me, that Lily's needs came first? I looked at my father. He was standing near the window, his back partially turned to us, staring out at the darkening yard. He had not said a word since we entered the room. But I noticed something I had not seen before. His hands hanging at his sides were trembling slightly. Not dramatically, just a faint quiver that he was trying to hide. There was tension in his shoulders, a rigidity that suggested he was holding something back. He looked like a man who wanted to speak but did not dare. For a moment I wondered what he would say if my mother were not in the room. Would he defend me? Would he apologise? Or would he just continue to stand there silent and complicit the way he always had? My mother stepped closer to me, lowering her voice as if she were sharing a confidence. "Madison, I know we have not always been as close as we should be. I know things have been complicated, but you have to understand our position. We gave you everything when you were growing up. We fed you, clothed, you put a roof over your head. We sacrificed so that you could have a future." I felt something tighten in my chest. I knew where this was going. I had heard variations of this speech before, though never quite so direct. "You owe us," she continued, her voice hardening, "for raising you, for everything we did. It is time to pay back." The words hit me like a physical blow. Not because they were surprising, but because they confirmed what I had always suspected. I was not a daughter to them. I was an investment that had finally matured, a debt that had come due. They did not care about my success or my happiness, or the years of struggle it had taken to get here. They cared about what they could extract from me now that I had something worth taking. "Pay back," I repeated slowly. "You want me to pay you back for being my parents." Do not twist my words. I am simply saying that family takes care of each other. You are in a position to help now, and Lily needs that help. It is not complicated. My father still had not moved, still had not spoken. I looked at him again, searching for some sign that he disagreed, that he recognised how wrong this was. But he kept his eyes on the window, his shoulders hunched, his trembling hands now shoved into his pockets. "Dad," I said quietly, "do you have anything to say?" He flinched at the sound of his name. For a moment I thought he might turn around. I thought he might finally find the courage to stand up, to say something honest, to acknowledge the daughter he had quietly apologised to with a grocery store cupcake 25 years ago. But the moment passed. He shook his head slightly, still facing the window. "Your mother is right," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Family is family." Something inside me went cold. I'd held onto a small hope buried so deep I barely knew it was there, that my father was different, that underneath his silence and compliance he saw me, that he understood. but he had chosen his side, the same side he had always chosen, and I was not on it. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could speak, a scream erupted from outside the door. "She owes us! She owes me!" The door burst open, and Lily stood in the doorway, her face twisted with rage, her eyes wild. She had been listening the entire time. Lily stood in the doorway, her chest heaving, her perfectly styled hair now slightly dishevelled. The mask of the poised, polished younger sister had slipped completely. In its place was something raw and ugly, a fury that had probably been simmering beneath the surface for years, hidden under layers of entitlement and favouritism. "You heard everything," I said. It was not a question. "Of course I heard everything," she spat. "This is my house too, and I have every right to know what lies you are telling about me behind closed doors." "I have not told a single lie tonight, Lily. Not one." My mother stepped between us, her hands raised as if she could physically stop the confrontation from escalating. "Everyone needs to calm down. This is getting out of hand. Madison, you are being unreasonable. All we are asking is for you to help your sister. That is what families do." Something inside me snapped. Not violently, not dramatically, but with a quiet finality that I had been building toward for decades. I was done being reasonable. I was done swallowing my pain to keep the peace. I was done pretending that the way they had treated me was acceptable. "Help my sister," I repeated, my voice steady but cold. "Let me tell you about the help I received from this family." I took a step forward and my mother actually moved back. Good. She should be uncomfortable. They all should be. When I graduate high school, there was supposed to be a college fund for me. $15,000 that Grandma had set aside before she died. Do you remember what happened to that money? My mother's expression flickered just for a moment. That was a long time ago. Circumstances were different. You gave it to Lily, every penny. You said she needed it for her private school tuition, for her piano lessons, for her summer programs. And when I asked what would happen to my education, do you remember what you told me? Silence. You told me I was smart enough to figure it out on my own. You told me that Lily needed more support because she was sensitive, because she struggled with pressure, because she was not as strong as I was. Lily made a sound of protest, but I kept going. So I figured it out. I earned an 80% scholarship through pure grades and test scores, and for the remaining 20% plus books, plus housing, plus food, I worked. 2 part-time jobs. One at a diner near campus where I worked the breakfast shift starting at 5 in the morning. Another at a retail store where I worked evenings until close. I slept 4 hours a night for 4 years. I ate ramen and peanut butter sandwiches because I could not afford anything else. I missed parties and social events and all the normal college experiences because I was too exhausted to do anything but study and work. My voice cracked slightly, but I pushed through. And the whole time, Lily was living in a nice apartment that you paid for, driving a car that you bought her going on spring break trips with her sorority sisters while I was picking up extra shifts just to afford my textbooks. My mother's face had gone pale, but her jaw was set with stubborn defiance. Lily needed it more. She was struggling. She has always been more delicate than you. You were always the strong one, Madison. You could handle it. I could handle it, I echoed. That was your justification. I could handle being abandoned, so it was acceptable to abandon me. We did not abandon you. We were right here. You were here for Lily, never for me. My father had not moved from his spot by the window. He still would not look at me. But as I stood there, confronting decades of neglect and favoritism, a memory surfaced that I had buried deep. A moment I had almost forgotten because it did not fit the narrative I had constructed about my family. I was 19 years old midway through my sophomore year. I had just found out that my laptop, the ancient second-hand machine I had bought with my first paycheck, had finally died. Without it, I could not complete my assignments. I could not apply for the internships I needed to build my resume. I was sitting in a coffee shop near campus, staring at a cup of cold coffee I could barely afford, trying to figure out how many extra shifts I would need to save up for a replacement. And then my father walked in. I had not told him I was there. I had not told anyone about the laptop. But somehow he knew. He sat down across from me without a word and slid a plain white envelope across the table. Inside was $2,000 in cash. "Don't tell your mother," he said quietly. "This is all I can do." I used that money to buy my first real laptop. It carried me through the rest of college and into my first job. I never told anyone where it came from. I never thanked him properly because I did not know how, and because part of me was angry that $2,000 in secret was apparently all my father thought I was worth. But standing in that study now, watching him tremble by the window, I understood something I had not understood before. He was not heartless. He was weak. He loved me in whatever limited way he was capable of, but he did not have the courage to stand up for that love. He had spent his entire marriage deferring to my mother, and that had cost him his relationship with his oldest daughter. It did not excuse him. It did not undo the years of silence and neglect. But it added a layer of tragedy to the situation that made my chest ache. I looked at my mother, then at Lily, then finally at my father's hunched shoulders. "I do not owe this family anything," I said, my voice firm but not angry. "I owe myself everything. Every success I have achieved came from my own work, my own sacrifice, my own refusal to give up even when no one believed in me. You do not get to claim credit for that. You do not get to cash in on something you had no part in building." Lily's face contorted with rage. She pushed past our mother and stepped directly in front of me, close enough that I could see the tears of fury building in her eyes. "You are destroying this family," she hissed through clenched teeth. "Everything was fine until you showed up tonight with your lies and your accusations. You are tearing us apart, tearing the family apart." The accusation hung in the air between us, so absurd that I almost wanted to laugh. Lily stood inches from my face, her breath coming in short, angry bursts, her eyes glistening with tears that I suspected were more about frustration than genuine hurt. Behind her, my parents watched in stunned silence. None of us had moved back toward the dining room, but I could hear footsteps in the hallway. The relatives were gathering, drawn by the raised voices, unable to resist witnessing the drama unfolding in their midst. "I am tearing the family apart," I repeated slowly. "That is interesting, Lily, because from where I am standing, I am the one who has been excluded from this family for 35 years. I am the one whose birthday party became a celebration of you. I am the one being asked to hand over money to people who never gave me anything." Lily's face twisted with something between rage and disbelief. "You think you are better than me, don't you? You have always thought that. You were always jealous of me, always resentful that Mum and Dad loved me more. That is what this is really about. You cannot stand that I was the favourite, so now you are trying to humiliate me in front of everyone." I stared at her, genuinely amazed at the mental gymnastics required to reach that conclusion. Jealous of what Lily, the attention I never got, the money that was stolen from me, the college fund that was supposed to be mine but went to pay for your piano lessons and your private school and your sorority dues. That money was not stolen. Mum and Dad made a decision about what was best for the family. What was best for you? There is a difference. You had scholarships. You did not need the money as much as I did. I had scholarships because I worked for them, because I stayed up until midnight studying while you were out with your friends, because I knew that no one was going to hand me anything, so I had to earn every single opportunity myself. Lily's jaw tightened. She was losing the argument, and she knew it. But instead of backing down, she did what she had always done when cornered. She escalated. "Fine," she said, her voice rising. "You want to talk about what is fair. Let us talk about what is fair. Mum and Dad raised both of us. They fed us, clothed us, kept a roof over our heads. Whatever you have now, you would not have it without them. So if you really have this big contract, this $30 million or whatever, then half of it should go to the family. That is only right. I heard a gasp from somewhere behind her. One of the aunts, probably. The audacity of the demand had apparently shocked even some of Lily's supporters. Half, I said flatly. You think you are entitled to half of my contract because we share parents. We share everything. That is what family means. We have never shared anything, Lily. You received and I went without. That is not sharing. That is taking. You are twisting things. You always twist things. I am stating facts. You do not like them because they do not paint you as the victim. Lily opened her mouth to respond, but before she could speak, another voice cut through the tension. It came from the doorway, firm and clear and utterly unexpected. Lily, that is enough. You are embarrassing yourself. We both turned. Aunt Ruth stood at the entrance to the study, her arms crossed, her expression stern. Behind her I could see the faces of several relatives peering in, watching the confrontation with wide eyes. Lily looked like she had been slapped. In all the years I could remember, no one in our family had ever publicly sided against her. Not once. She was the golden child, the one everyone praised and protected and made excuses for. The idea that anyone would call her out in front of others was clearly incomprehensible to her. Aunt Ruth, she stammered, you do not understand. Madison is the one who started this. She came here and made up stories about some contract just to get attention and turn everyone against me. I heard the conversation, Aunt Ruth said calmly. All of it. And I saw the email on Madison's phone earlier when she showed your mother. That contract is real. Her success is real. And your behaviour right now is appalling. My mother stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. Ruth, this is none of your business. This is between me and my daughters. It became my business when you decided to humiliate your oldest child at her own birthday party. I have watched you favour Lily for decades, and I have held my tongue because I did not want to cause conflict. But this has gone too far. Madison deserves better than this, and frankly, so does Lily. You have done that girl no favours by teaching her that she is entitled to everything without earning any of it. The room went deadly silent. I had never heard Aunt Ruth speak to my mother that way. No one had. My mother's face cycled through several emotions: shock, anger, humiliation, before settling into a cold, closed expression. Lily, meanwhile, was unravelling. The mask she had worn her entire life, the perfect daughter, the beloved sister, the one who could do no wrong, was cracking in front of everyone. She looked around the room at the faces of her relatives, searching for support, for validation, for someone to tell her that Aunt Ruth was wrong, and she was still the golden child they all adored. But no one spoke. No one rushed to her defence. For the first time in her life, Lily was alone. Her breathing grew ragged, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. I could see something building behind her eyes, a pressure that was about to explode. She grabbed a water glass from the side table near the door, and for one terrifying moment I thought she was going to throw it at me. But instead she hurled it at the floor between us. The glass shattered with a sound like a small explosion, shards scattering across the hardwood water, splashing onto my shoes. I will make you regret this, Madison, she said, her voice low and shaking with rage. I swear to God, I will make you regret this. I did not stay to watch the aftermath. After Lily's threat, after the glass shattered at my feet, I turned and walked out of that house without another word. No one tried to stop me. No one called my name or asked me to stay. I grabbed my purse from the hallway table, stepped over the shards of broken glass, and made my way through the cluster of stunned relatives still gathered near the study door. Aunt Ruth caught my eye as I passed, and she gave me a small nod that seemed to say, "Go get out of here, we will talk later." I nodded back and kept walking. The drive from Ohio to Chicago took nearly 5 hours. I made it in 4.5, pushing the speed limit, the entire way needing to put as much distance as possible between myself and that house. The sun had already set by the time I left, and the highway stretched before me like a dark ribbon, empty except for the occasional truck rumbling past in the opposite direction. I did not turn on the radio. I did not call anyone. I just drove, letting the hum of the engine and the rhythm of the road fill the silence. It was nearly midnight when I finally pulled into the parking garage beneath my apartment building. The concrete walls felt like a protective shell closing around me, blocking out the world I had just escaped. I sat in my car for a long moment after turning off the engine, my hands still gripping the steering wheel, my body slowly releasing the tension it had been holding for hours. My apartment was on the 14th floor of a modest building in a quiet neighborhood. It was not large, just a one-bedroom with a small kitchen and a living area that doubled as my home office. The furniture was simple, most of it second-hand, or bought on sale during my leaner years. The walls held a few pieces of art I had collected over time prints from local artists and a watercolour I had fallen in love with at a street fair years ago. Nothing expensive, nothing flashy, but every single item in that space belonged to me. I had earned it. I had paid for it. No one had given me anything. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, and for the first time all day, I felt like I could breathe. The familiar scent of my own space, the soft glow of the city lights through the windows, the quiet that belonged only to me. It was not much by some standards, but after the chaos of my parents' house, it felt like a sanctuary. I dropped my purse on the kitchen counter and walked to the window. Chicago spread out below me, a grid of lights and shadows, cars moving slowly through the streets, the distant glow of downtown rising against the night sky. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass and closed my eyes. The memories came unbidden, rising up from places I had tried to keep locked away. The meals I had skipped in college because I could not afford both food and textbooks. The vacations I had never taken because I was always working, always saving, always preparing for a future that no one believed I would have. The phone calls home that went unanswered, or worse, were answered with impatience and cut short because Lily needed something, because there was always something more important than talking to me. And then there were the times I had helped Lily anyway, despite everything. The phone bill I had paid when she called me crying because her service was about to be shut off and she could not reach Mum. The $500 I had lent her for a security deposit on an apartment, money she had promised to pay back within a month and never mentioned again. The emergency that always seemed to arise whenever I was finally getting ahead, pulling me back, draining my resources, reminding me that no matter how far I ran, my family would always find a way to take from me. I had done all of that quietly without complaint because I thought that was what family meant. I thought if I just helped it enough, sacrificed enough, maybe they would finally see me. Maybe they would finally love me the way they loved Lily. But tonight had shown me the truth. There was no amount of sacrifice that would ever be enough. I could give them everything I had, and they would still see me as the lesser daughter, the backup plan, the one who existed only to support Lily's needs. I walked to the kitchen and opened a bottle of wine, pouring myself a glass with steady hands. I carried it back to the window and set it down on the small table beside my reading chair. The wine glowed deep red in the dim light, and I stared at it for a moment before speaking out loud to the empty room. No more. My voice was quiet, but firm, a promise made to no one but myself. I will not let them take anything else from me. Not my money, not my peace, not my sense of worth. I am done being the invisible daughter. I am done waiting for people who will never see me to finally open their eyes. I picked up the wine glass and took a slow sip, letting the warmth spread through my chest. Outside, the city hummed with life, indifferent to my small declaration of independence. But it did not matter if anyone else heard. I had heard myself, and that was enough. My phone buzzed on the counter. I walked over and picked it up, expecting maybe a text from a colleague or an automated notification. Instead, I saw a missed call from Aunt Ruth, time-stamped about an hour ago. I made a mental note to call her back tomorrow, grateful that at least one person in my family seemed to genuinely care. But beneath that missed call was something else. A voicemail notification. The number was Lily's. I hesitated for a moment, my thumb hovering over the play button. Part of me wanted to delete it without listening to preserve the fragile peace I had just claimed. But I needed to know what I was dealing with. I needed to understand how far she was willing to go. I pressed play and held the phone to my ear. Lily's voice came through cold and controlled, nothing like the hysterical screaming from earlier. This was calculated. This was a threat delivered with precision. Madison, it is me. I know you think you won tonight, but you are wrong. If you do not help this family the way Mom asks, Dad is going to cut you off forever. You will never see him again. And if that is not enough to convince you, then let me be clear. I will make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. Your colleagues, your clients, everyone. Do not test me. The voicemail ended and I stood in the darkness of my apartment, the phone still pressed to my ear even though there was nothing left to hear. Lily's words echoed in my mind, each one sharp and deliberate. She had not screamed this time. She had not lost control. This was something far more dangerous. This was my sister, calm and calculated, laying out exactly what she intended to do if I did not fall in line. I deleted the voicemail. My thumb moved across the screen without hesitation, erasing her voice from my phone. But I could not erase it from my memory. Every syllable had burned itself into my brain, and I knew with absolute certainty that Lily meant every word. She had never been one to make empty threats. When we were children, she had promised to tell our mother about a broken vase I had accidentally knocked over, and she had followed through within the hour. When we were teenagers, she had threatened to spread rumours about a boy I liked, and by the next day, the entire school believed I had done things I had never done. Lily understood the power of words. She understood how to weaponize information. And now she had set her sights on me. I tried to return to normal life. Monday morning, I woke up early, showered, made coffee, and sat down at my desk to review documents for an upcoming client meeting. The Meridian contract required my full attention. There were timelines to establish deliverables, to outline 100 small details that needed to be perfect. I told myself that Lily's threats were just noise, that she could not actually hurt me, that my professional life existed in a completely separate sphere from my family drama. I was wrong. It was Tuesday afternoon when my colleague Rachel sent me a message. We had worked together for 3 years, and she was one of the few people at the company I considered a genuine friend. Her text was short and direct. Madison, have you seen this? I'm sorry. Below the message was a link. I clicked it and my stomach dropped. It was a Facebook post from Lily made public so anyone could see it. The words were carefully chosen, designed to paint a picture without naming names directly. Some people forget where they came from. They get a little success and suddenly family means nothing. Blood is thicker than water. Or so I thought, but I guess some people are just heartless. Pray for my family during this difficult time. Below the post were dozens of comments. I scrolled through them slowly, my coffee growing cold beside me, my chest tightening with each new message of support for my sister. Cousin Patricia had written, "So sad. Family should always come first." Uncle Harold commented, "Money changes people. Stay strong, Lily." A woman I barely recognised from some distant branch of the family tree added, "This is why I always say success means nothing if you lose your soul." There were more. So many more. People I had not spoken to in years, people who did not know me, people who had never once asked about my life or my work or my struggles. They were all united now in their condemnation of the unnamed villain in Lily's story. And I knew without any doubt that I was the villain she was describing. Lily was controlling the narrative. She had struck first, framing herself as the victim, before I even had a chance to speak. Anyone who saw this post would believe that some heartless family member had betrayed her, had chosen money over blood, had abandoned the people who raised her. They would not know about the college fund that was stolen from me. They would not know about the years of favoritism and neglect. They would not know about the birthday party, where I was humiliated in front of everyone. All they would see was Lily's version of events, and that version painted me as a monster. I closed the app and set my phone face down on the desk. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from something closer to rage. She was trying to destroy me before I could defend myself. She was trying to turn everyone against me so that even if I spoke up, no one would believe my side. My phone buzzed again. I hesitated before picking it up, bracing myself for another attack. But this time, the message was different. It was from Aunt Ruth. I saw what Lily posted. Don't let them rewrite your story, Madison. They have been doing it your whole life, and it's time for that to stop. Call me when you're ready. I'm on your side. I read those words 3 times, letting them sink in. In the middle of all this chaos, all this manipulation and betrayal, there was one person who saw through it. One person who was willing to stand with me. I saved the message and promised myself I would call her soon. But before I could do anything else, a new notification appeared. An email this time landing in my inbox with a quiet chime that somehow felt ominous. The sender was a name I did not recognize, but the domain was unmistakable. It was from a law firm. The subject line read, RE legal notice on behalf of Sharp family. I opened it with trembling fingers. The email was written in the cold formal language that lawyers use when they want to intimidate. Every sentence was carefully constructed to sound official and threatening, filled with phrases like cease and desist and potential litigation and damages incurred. I read through it twice, my heart pounding harder with each word. The letter claimed to be written on behalf of Lily Sharp and the Sharp family. It stated that during the gathering on September 23rd, I had made false and defamatory statements about my sister that had caused her significant emotional distress and reputational harm. It alleged that my comments in front of family members constituted intentional infliction of emotional distress, and that Lily was considering pursuing legal action unless I agreed to certain demands. Those demands included a formal written apology, a retraction of my statements to all family members present at the party, and financial compensation for the psychological damage I had allegedly caused. The letter concluded by stating that if I did not respond within 14 days, Lily would proceed with filing a lawsuit in civil court. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. This was not just a threat. This was an escalation I had not anticipated. They had actually hired a lawyer. They had put this in writing. They were trying to use the legal system to force me into submission. For a moment, I felt the old familiar panic rising in my chest. The same panic I had felt as a teenager when my mother would yell at me for things that were not my fault. The same panic I had felt in college when I did not know how I was going to pay my rent. The instinct to shrink, to apologize, to make myself small so that the conflict would go away. But then I stopped. I took a breath. And I actually read the letter again this time with the analytical mind I had developed over 12 years in business. The claims were absurd. Defamation requires proving that someone made a false statement. Everything I had said at that dinner was true. I had not lied about the contract. I had not lied about my college fund being given to Lily. I had not lied about working 2 jobs while Lily received everything. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation. Any competent lawyer would know that. As for intentional infliction of emotional distress, that required proving extreme and outrageous conduct. Telling your family the truth about your own life does not qualify. Courts have very high standards for that kind of claim, and nothing I said came close to meeting them. This letter was not a serious legal threat. It was a scare tactic, a bluff designed to make me panic and surrender before I realized that they had no real case. It was the kind of thing bullies do when they have no actual power. They puff themselves up, make loud noises, and hope their target backs down without a fight. I understood exactly what they were trying to do. If I panicked and apologized, they would win. They would have proof that I admitted wrongdoing, and they could use that against me forever. If I fought back aggressively, they would call me the villain. We would tell everyone that I was attacking poor, innocent Lily, that I was tearing the family apart, that I was proving everything they had said about me on Facebook. Either way, I was supposed to lose. But there was a third option, an option they had not considered because they did not know who I had become. In my career, I had dealt with intimidation tactics before. Competitors who tried to undercut my proposals with false information. Executives who tried to bully me into accepting bad deals. Companies that threatened to pull contracts if I did not lower my rates. I had learned through years of hard experience that the worst thing you can do when someone tries to control you is let them set the terms of the engagement. The moment you react the way they expect you to react, you have already lost. The key is to change the game entirely. Do something they do not anticipate. Take the power back by refusing to play by their rules. I closed the email and leaned back in my chair, a slow smile spreading across my face. They thought they were dealing with the same Madison who had silently endured their abuse for 3 decades. They thought a threatening letter from a lawyer would be enough to break me. They had no idea what I was capable of. If they want to play this game, I said out loud to my empty apartment, they picked the wrong opponent. I picked up my phone and opened my contacts. I scrolled past names of colleagues and clients, past old friends I had not spoken to in years, until I found the one I was looking for. Samuel Ward. We had been classmates in graduate school back when I was still trying to figure out who I wanted to be. He had gone on to become a lawyer specializing in civil litigation. We had dated briefly, but the relationship ended amicably when we both realized we were too focused on our careers to give each other the attention we deserved. We had stayed friends, and over the years, he had helped me navigate a few tricky situations with contracts and business disputes. Samuel was smart, thorough, and absolutely ruthless when he needed to be. He also knew my family. He had met them once years ago, and I still remembered the look on his face afterward. He had not said much, but his silence spoke volumes. I typed out a message, keeping it brief and direct. I knew he would understand. I need your help. Again. Samuel responded to my text within an hour. No questions, no hesitation, just a simple message telling me to meet him at our usual coffee shop the next morning. That was one of the things I had always appreciated about him. He did not waste time with unnecessary words. When something needed to be done, he simply did it. I arrived at the coffee shop a few minutes early, choosing a quiet table in the back corner where we could talk without being overheard. The place was a small independent spot we had discovered years ago when we were both students surviving on cheap coffee and expensive dreams. The owners had changed since then, but the atmosphere remained the same. Warm lighting, mismatched furniture, the smell of freshly ground beans. It felt like neutral ground, a space that belonged to neither of us, but had witnessed some of the most important conversations of our friendship. Samuel walked in exactly on time, tall and composed in a dark grey suit that probably cost more than my first car. He had done well for himself since law school. His practice focused on civil litigation, and he had built a reputation for being thorough, precise, and absolutely relentless when representing his clients. But beneath the polished exterior was the same person I had known for over a decade, the one who had stayed up late with me studying for exams, who had listened without judgment when I talked about my family, who had held my hand through some of the hardest moments of my life. We had dated briefly during our second year. It was the kind of relationship that made sense on paper, but never quite worked in practice. I was working 2 jobs while carrying a full course load, and he was interning at a prestigious firm that demanded 80-hour weeks. We barely had time to see each other, and when we did, we were both too exhausted to be fully present. The breakup was mutual and painless, more of a gentle acknowledgement that the timing was wrong than any kind of dramatic ending. We had stayed friends, and in some ways our friendship had grown stronger without the pressure of romance complicating things. 5 years ago, Samuel had helped me through one of the worst experiences of my career. A former business partner had tried to defraud me, manipulating contracts and siphoning funds from a joint venture we had established. I had been devastated not just by the financial loss, but by the betrayal. Samuel had stepped in, without hesitation, reviewing documents, building a case, and ultimately helping me recover most of what had been taken. He had seen me at my lowest and never once treated me as weak. He knew what I was capable of when I set my mind to something. He also knew my family. He had met them once, years ago, when I made the mistake of bringing him to a holiday dinner. I thought it would be a good opportunity to introduce him to my parents, to show them that I was building a life worth being proud of. Instead, the evening had been a disaster. My mother had barely acknowledged his presence, spending most of the dinner talking about Lily's accomplishments. My father had offered a few polite words, but nothing more. And when Samuel tried to ask about my own work, my mother had interrupted to change the subject. On the drive home that night, Samuel had been quiet for a long time. Finally, he said something I had never forgotten. "Your mother looked at you like you were a stranger who had wandered into her house by accident." I had not known how to respond. He was right, but hearing it out loud made the truth harder to ignore. Now he sat across from me at our corner table, his expression serious, as I handed him my phone with the legal threat email open on the screen. He read through it slowly, his eyes moving line by line, his face revealing nothing. When he reached the end, he scrolled back to the top and read it again. Then he laughed. It was not a polite chuckle or a nervous reaction. It was a genuine laugh, the kind that comes from finding something truly absurd. "This is garbage," he said, setting the phone down on the table. "Absolute garbage. No lawyer with half a brain would take this to court. Defamation requires a false statement, and from what you have told me, everything you said at that dinner was true. Truth is an absolute defense. They cannot sue you for telling the truth." "I know," I said. "I figured that out on my own. But knowing it and dealing with it are two different things." "What do you mean?" "They are not going to stop, Samuel. The lawsuit threat is just one piece. Lily has already started a campaign against me on social media. She is turning the entire family against me, painting me as some kind of heartless villain who abandoned her own blood. Even if the legal threat goes nowhere, she is going to keep coming after me. She is going to try to destroy my reputation, my relationships, maybe even my career." Samuel leaned back in his chair, studying me with the same focused intensity he brought to every case. "So what do you want to do about it?" "That is why I called you. I need to know my options." He was quiet for a moment, turning his coffee cup slowly in his hands. When he spoke again, his voice was calm but serious. "You have two choices, Madison. You can stay defensive, ignore the threats, let the social media posts slide, hope that eventually they get bored and move on. Sometimes that works. Sometimes bullies lose interest when they do not get a reaction. And the other choice," he looked at me directly, his eyes steady, "you strike back. You stop waiting for them to make moves and start making moves of your own. You gather evidence, build a case, and show them that attacking you has consequences." I thought about everything that had happened. The birthday party, the voicemail, the Facebook post, the legal threat. Each one was an escalation, a new attempt to break me down and force me into submission. Staying defensive meant letting them continue hoping they would eventually stop on their own. But hope had never gotten me anywhere with my family. I lifted my chin and met Samuel's gaze. "Strike back." The word hung in the air between us for a moment, heavy with implication. Strike back. It was not something I'd ever allowed myself to consider before. My entire life I had been trained to absorb the blows, to keep my head down, to survive by not making waves. But survival was no longer enough. I was done letting my family dictate the terms of my existence. Samuel nodded slowly, as if he had expected this answer. He pulled a small notebook from his jacket pocket and set it on the table, clicking his pen open, with practiced efficiency. "All right. If we are going to do this properly, I need to understand everything. Not just what happened at the birthday party, but the full history. Financial arrangements, agreements, anything involving money between you and your family." I took a deep breath and began. I told him about the college fund, $15,000 that my grandmother had set aside for my education before she died. money that was supposed to help me build a future. Instead, my parents had transferred every penny to Lily when I was 17, claiming she needed it for private school tuition and extracurricular activities. I had found out by accident overhearing a conversation between my parents late one night. When I confronted them, my mother had simply said that Lily's needs were more urgent and that I was smart enough to find another way. I told him about the loans. The countless times Lily had called me over the years crying about some emergency or another. A phone bill that was about to be shut off. A car repair she could not afford. A security deposit for an apartment. Each time I had sent money believing it was a loan that would be repaid. The total over the years had climbed past $10,000. Not a single penny had ever come back. I told him about the car, an old sedan that had belonged to my grandmother left to me, specifically in her will. It was not worth much, but it was mine, the only thing I had ever inherited. My parents had sold it without my permission when I was in college, using the money to buy Lily a dress and accessories for her senior prom. When I found out, my mother had dismissed my anger with a wave of her hand. It was just an old car. Lily needed to look her best for her special night. Samuel wrote everything down his pen, moving steadily across the page. His expression grew darker with each detail I shared. When I finally stopped talking, he set his pen down and looked at me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. Madison, what you are describing is a pattern of financial abuse. I know that sounds like a strong term, but that is exactly what it is. Your family has systematically taken from you for years using guilt and manipulation to justify it. And in my experience, families like this rarely stop at what is visible on the surface. What do you mean? He leaned forward, lowering his voice even though the coffee shop was nearly empty. I mean, there is usually more you do not know about. People who are willing to take your college fund and sell your car without permission are often willing to go further. They just do it in ways that are harder to detect. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Further, how... Let me ask you something. When was the last time you checked your credit report? I blinked, caught off guard by the question. My credit report, I do not think I ever have. Not formally. I mean, I have good credit. I pay my bills on time. I have never had any problems getting approved for things. But have you actually looked at the full report, seen every account listed under your name? I shook my head slowly. No, I never had a reason to. I am not planning to buy a house anytime soon. I have not needed any major loans. Samuel's expression was grim. Madison, with families like yours, it is entirely possible that someone has been using your identity without your knowledge, opening credit cards in your name, taking out loans, running up debt that you do not even know exists. The thought had never occurred to me. It seemed impossible. Surely I would have noticed something. Surely there would have been warning signs. But even as I tried to dismiss the idea, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered that maybe I had been too trusting. Maybe I had been so focused on building my career and staying away from my family that I had missed something important. How would I check? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. There is a website called Annual Credit Report. It is the official site where you can request a free copy of your credit report from each of the 3 major bureaus. It is completely legitimate, and it is your legal right to access this information. I want you to go home tonight and check it. Look at every account listed. Look at the addresses associated with each one. And if you see anything, you do not recognize anything at all, call me immediately. I nodded, feeling a strange mix of fear and determination. Part of me did not want to know. Part of me wanted to believe that despite everything, my family would never cross that particular line. But a larger part of me understood that I needed the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I could not fight an enemy I could not see. We finished our coffee and parted ways with a promise to talk again soon. I went home and did exactly what Samuel had instructed. I sat down at my computer, navigated to the website, and requested my credit reports from all 3 bureaus. The process took about 20 minutes. When the reports finally loaded on my screen, I began to read. The next evening, my phone rang. Samuel's name appeared on the screen. I answered immediately. His voice was grave, stripped of its usual professional calm. Madison. I was right. There is something you need to see. Samuel's voice on the phone was enough to tell me that whatever he had found was serious. I had spent the previous night reviewing my own credit reports, and what I discovered had kept me awake until nearly 3 a.m. But Samuel's tone suggested there was more. There was always more with my family. "Can you come to my office tomorrow morning?" he asked. "I think we need to discuss this in person." I agreed without hesitation. Sleep was impossible anyway. My mind kept returning to what I had found on those credit reports, the entry that did not belong, the account I had never opened, the debt I had never incurred. The next morning, I sat across from Samuel in his office, a sleek space on the 22nd floor of a downtown high-rise. The view of the city was impressive, but I barely noticed it. My attention was fixed on the folder he had placed on the desk between us. "Tell me what you found first," he said gently. "Walk me through what you saw on your credit reports." I took a shaky breath. There was a credit card, a store card from a department chain I never shop at. It was opened 3 years ago. The address listed is my parents' house in Ohio, not my apartment here. The account was maxed out at $12,000, and the payments have been overdue for months. My credit score dropped almost 100 points because of it. Samuel nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he had already suspected. "Did you recognize any of the charges?" I could not see the individual transactions, just the total balance and the payment history. But I know I did not open that card. I have never shopped at that store in my life. I do not even have a store card anywhere. I hate carrying extra cards. He opened the folder in front of him and slid a few pages across the desk toward me. I did some additional research, public records, financial databases, things I have access to through my work. What I found is worse than a single fraudulent credit card. I looked down at the papers. They were printouts of financial summaries, account statements, debt records. The name on all of them was Lily Sharp. "Your sister has approximately $45,000 in personal credit card debt across multiple accounts. The spending patterns are consistent with luxury purchases. Designer clothing and accessories, high-end spa treatments, expensive restaurants, multiple international trips, including that European vacation your parents announced at your birthday party." I stared at the numbers, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. $45,000. That was more than I had earned in my first 2 years out of college combined, and Lily had spent it on bags and facials and vacations. "This is why they wanted my money," I said quietly. "This is why my mother was so insistent that I help Lily. She is drowning in debt." "It appears so, but that is not the only thing I found." He pulled out another document and handed it to me. It was a letter on official university letterhead addressed to Lily at her campus apartment. The subject line made my blood run cold. "Notice of academic dismissal." I read through the letter twice, struggling to absorb the words. Lily was being expelled from her graduate program. The reason was plagiarism. According to the letter, she had submitted a thesis chapter that contained substantial portions copied from published sources without proper citation. An academic integrity committee had reviewed the evidence and determined that the violation was severe enough to warrant immediate dismissal. She had the right to appeal, but the tone of the letter suggested the case against her was ironclad. The perfect student. The golden child. The one my parents had invested everything in. She had been cheating. "How did you get this?" I asked, my voice hollow. "The dismissal is a matter of university record now. Once a student is formally expelled for academic dishonesty, it becomes part of their permanent file. Anyone conducting a background check would eventually find it." I set the letter down on the desk, my hands trembling. Everything I thought I knew about my sister was crumbling. She was not the successful graduate student my parents believed her to be. She was not the responsible adult who just needed a little help getting back on her feet. She was a fraud, a cheat, and apparently a thief. The credit card, I said slowly, the pieces finally clicking together. The one opened in my name. Lily opened it. Samuel nodded. That is the logical conclusion. The address is your parents' house where she has access to mail. She would have had access to your personal information, your social security number, your date of birth, everything needed to open an account in your name. She stole my identity. The words felt strange coming out of my mouth, like I was describing something that had happened to someone else. But the evidence was right in front of me. My sister, my own blood, had committed fraud in my name. She had opened a credit card, maxed it out on purchases for herself, and then stopped making payments, leaving me to deal with the consequences. My credit score was damaged, my financial reputation was tarnished, and I had not even known until now. Madison, Samuel said gently but firmly, I need you to understand the severity of what we are dealing with here. This is not just family drama anymore. Identity theft is a federal crime. What Lily did is punishable by years in prison. We are not talking about a civil dispute between sisters. We are talking about criminal activity. I sat in silence, trying to process everything. My sister had stolen from me in ways I never imagined possible. She had taken my college fund, my car, my loans that were never repaid. And now she had taken my very identity, using my name to fund a lifestyle she could not afford. The image of Lily at the birthday party flashed through my mind. Her smug smile when my parents handed her gifts, her outrage when I announced my contract, her screaming threat as I walked out the door. She had been desperate, I realized now, not because she was struggling with legitimate hardships, but because her entire life was built on lies and theft, and the foundation was starting to crack. What else has she done? I whispered, almost afraid to hear the answer. Samuel did not answer my question immediately. Instead, he reached for his phone and began typing a message. I think we need to bring in someone who might have more information, someone who has been watching your family dynamics for years and might know things that even you do not. Aunt Ruth, I said, understanding immediately. She texted you after the Facebook incident. She said not to let them rewrite your story. That tells me she has seen things, heard things. People who make statements like that usually have reasons. He sent a message, and within minutes his phone rang. Aunt Ruth was calling back. Samuel put her on speaker so I could hear the conversation. Mrs. Patterson, thank you for speaking with me. I am Samuel Ward, Madison's attorney. She is here with me now. We are trying to understand the full scope of what has been happening in your family, and we believe you might have information that could help. There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Aunt Ruth spoke, her voice was careful, but warm. I have been waiting for someone to ask the right questions for a long time. What do you need to know? Samuel glanced at me, then continued. We have discovered some serious financial irregularities involving Lily. We believe she may have been engaging in fraudulent activity for years. Has anything ever seemed off to you? Any incidents that did not quite add up? Another pause longer this time. I could almost hear Aunt Ruth weighing her words. There is something I never told Madison. I did not want to upset her, and I was not entirely sure what to make of it at the time. But about 2 years ago, I received an email that I thought was from her. My heart began to pound. An email from me. It came from an address that looked like yours, madison.sharp.help@gmail. The message said you had lost your job and were struggling to pay your rent. It said you were embarrassed and did not want to ask your parents because you knew they would judge you. You asked if I could lend you $3,000 to get through the month, and you promised to pay it back as soon as you got back on your feet. I felt the blood drained from my face. Aunt Ruth, I never sent that email. I have never lost my job. I have never asked anyone for money. I know that now, sweetheart. But at the time, it seemed so real. The message sounded like you. It mentioned details about your work, about your apartment. I did not think twice. I just wanted to help. Samuel leaned forward. Mrs. Patterson, how did you send the money? That is the strange part. The email said you were travelling overseas for work and could not access your American bank accounts easily. It asked me to send the money through Venmo to your sister Lily, who would forward it to you. I thought it was a little unusual, but I trusted that it was legitimate. The room seemed to tilt around me. Lily had not just stolen my identity to open credit cards. She had impersonated me to scam our own aunt out of $3,000. She had created a fake email address, crafted a believable story, and directed the money straight into her own account. This was not a spontaneous act of desperation. This was calculated. This was planned. Did you ever receive the money back? Samuel asked. No, I never mentioned it to Madison because I did not want to embarrass her. And when time passed and she did not bring it up, I assumed she was still struggling. That is part of why I was so happy when she announced her contract at the birthday party. I thought she had finally turned things around. I could barely speak. My aunt had believed I was a struggling failure for 2 years because Lily had planted that lie. Every interaction we had, every conversation had been coloured by that false narrative, and I had no idea. Samuel thanked Aunt Ruth and promised to follow up with more questions soon. After he ended the call, he turned to me with a grim expression. I had a feeling this was not an isolated incident, so I made some discreet inquiries with a few other relatives whose contact information I was able to find. I presented myself as your attorney investigating potential fraud. And at least 3 other family members received similar emails over the past few years. Your Uncle Harold sent $1,500, your cousin Patricia sent $2,000, another distant relative sent $500. The total across all of them comes to approximately $8,000. $8,000. Lily had stolen $8,000 from our own family by pretending to be me, and every single one of those relatives now believed that I was the kind of person who borrowed money and never paid it back. That was why they had commented on Lily's Facebook post with such conviction. They were not just taking her side out of blind loyalty. They genuinely believed I had wronged them. This is why they hate me, I said, the realization hitting like a physical blow. This is why they think I am heartless and selfish. Lily has been poisoning them against me for years. She took their money, made them think it was me, and then let them resent me when I never acknowledged the debt. Samuel nodded. It is a remarkably effective strategy. She gets the money, you get the blame, and she comes out looking like the loyal daughter who would never do such a thing. Meanwhile, you have no idea any of this is happening because no one ever confronts you directly. I sat back in my chair, overwhelmed by the scope of what my sister had done. The credit card fraud was bad enough. But this was something else entirely. This was a systematic campaign to destroy my reputation while enriching herself. She had turned our own family into her victims and her weapons simultaneously. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a text message from my mother. The words on the screen made my stomach clench. Family meeting, Sunday next week. Everyone will be there. Don't you dare skip. I spent the week between receiving my mother's text and the family meeting preparing. Samuel and I worked late into the night, organising evidence, documenting every piece of fraud we had uncovered, creating a clear timeline of Lily's crimes. I saved everything to a secure folder on my phone and backed it up in the cloud. I was not walking into that meeting unprepared. Sunday arrived grey and cold, the kind of late autumn day that matches a heavy mood. I drove to Ohio with my hands steady on the wheel and my heart beating faster than I wanted to admit. Part of me still dreaded facing my family. That scared little girl who just wanted to be loved had not disappeared entirely, but she was no longer in control. The woman driving that car was someone who had spent 2 weeks uncovering the truth, and she was ready to use it. I pulled into my parents' driveway and counted the cars. 7 vehicles, not including my own. The entire extended family had been summoned. This was not a casual conversation. This was an intervention carefully orchestrated to maximize pressure on me. My mother had probably spent days coaching everyone on what to say. The front door was unlocked. I walked in without knocking and made my way to the living room, where the murmur of voices fell silent as I appeared in the doorway. The room was packed. My parents sat together on the main sofa, my mother's posture rigid with self-righteous authority. My father looked tired, smaller somehow, like a man who had given up fighting years ago. Lily was positioned in the armchair closest to our parents, her face arranged in an expression of wounded innocence that I might have believed 2 weeks ago. Around them sat aunts, uncles, and cousins, filling every available seat and spilling onto dining chairs that had been brought in from the other room. Aunt Ruth was there too, sitting slightly apart from the others near the window. She caught my eye and gave me the smallest nod of encouragement. I took the only empty seat, a wooden chair that had been placed facing the rest of the room like a defendant's chair in a courtroom. The setup was deliberate. Everyone facing me. Everyone united against me. My mother cleared her throat and began without preamble. Thank you all for coming. I know this is difficult, but we need to address what has been happening in our family. We are here because Madison has been tearing this family apart. The words landed exactly as she intended them, to setting the tone for everything that would follow. I was the problem. I was the reason for this gathering. Not Lily, not the favoritism, not the decades of mistreatment. Just me. Over the past few weeks, Madison has made serious accusations against her sister and against this family. She has tried to turn relatives against each other. She has refused to help when her sister needed support, and she has shown a complete disregard for the values we raised her with. I said nothing. I had decided before arriving that I would let them speak first. Let them reveal their strategy. Let them show everyone exactly how they intended to twist the truth. My mother turned to Uncle Harold. Harold, would you like to share what Madison did to you? Uncle Harold shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He was not a cruel man, just easily led. He cleared his throat and avoided looking directly at me. A couple years back, Madison contacted me saying she was in trouble, needed money for rent. I sent her $1,500 because that is what family does. She never paid it back, never even mentioned it again. I watched his face as he spoke. He genuinely believed what he was saying. He had no idea that the email he received had not come from me. Cousin Patricia went next, telling a similar story about the $2,000 she had sent. Then, another distant relative I barely recognized spoke about $500. Each one painted the same picture. Madison, the borrower. Madison, the taker. Madison, who reached out when she needed something and then vanished without gratitude or repayment. The room's judgment pressed against me like a physical weight. I could feel the disapproval radiating from every direction. These people had known me my entire life, and they believed I was exactly the kind of person Lily had made me out to be. Lily spoke last, her voice trembling with perfectly calibrated emotion. I never wanted it to come to this. Madison is my sister and I love her, but she has changed. Ever since she got that contract, she has become someone I do not recognize. She cares more about money than family. She would rather see us suffer than share even a little of what she has. I do not know what happened to the sister I grew up with. It was a masterful performance. Tears glistened in her eyes. Her voice cracked at exactly the right moments. If I had not spent the past 2 weeks uncovering her lies, I might have been moved by it myself. My mother looked at me with cold satisfaction. Madison, do you have anything to say for yourself? This was her strategy. Surround me with accusers. Overwhelm me with false evidence. Force me to defend myself against claims I did not even know existed until recently. In front of the whole family, I was supposed to crumble. I was supposed to apologize to agree to help Lily to fall back into my role as the invisible daughter who gave and never complained. She did not know that I had spent the past 2 weeks preparing for exactly this moment. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could speak, another voice cut through the tension. "Yeah, I have a question first." Everyone turned toward Aunt Ruth. She had risen from her seat by the window and was looking directly at my mother with an expression I had never seen her wear before. It was calm, measured, and completely unafraid. Before Madison responds to these accusations, I would like to understand something. When the girls were young, their grandmother left money for both of them. College funds. I remember because Mother talked about it before she passed. She wanted both girls to have an equal start in life. Aunt Ruth paused, letting her words sink in. Why did Madison not receive her college fund like Lily did? The room went silent. My mother's face flickered with something between surprise and anger. She had not anticipated this question. She had not prepared a script for it. "That is not relevant to what we are discussing today," my mother said stiffly. "I think it is very relevant," Aunt Ruth replied. "We are talking about Madison's character, about whether she is selfish and ungrateful. But I remember a young girl who worked 2 jobs through college while her sister had everything paid for. I remember a young woman who never complained, never asked for help, never made demands on anyone. That does not sound like someone who would borrow money and refuse to pay it back." The crack in the family narrative was small, but it was there. I could see doubt flickering across some of the faces in the room. Uncle Harold was frowning, reconsidering. Cousin Patricia was looking at Lily with something less than complete trust. My mother tried to regain control. "Ruth, this is not the time to rehash old decisions. We did what was best for both girls." "Did you?" The question hung in the air. My mother had no answer that would not incriminate her further. I stood up slowly, drawing every eye in the room. My hand went to my phone in my pocket. I had waited long enough. It was time. "Since everyone is here," I said, my voice steady, "let me show you something." The room watched as I pulled out my phone. My mother's expression shifted from confident control to something warier, like a predator, sensing that the prey might not be as helpless as expected. Lily's manufactured tears had stopped, replaced by a hard stare that followed my every movement. I could feel the tension building, the anticipation of whatever was about to happen next. I had prepared for this moment carefully. The night before, I had tested the connection multiple times, making sure everything would work smoothly. My parents had a smart TV in their living room, a gift Lily had convinced them to buy a few years ago. I knew it was connected to the same Wi-Fi network I had used during previous visits. All I needed was a few seconds to establish the connection. I opened the screen mirroring function on my phone and selected the TV. For a moment, nothing happened, and I could see my mother's lips curl into the beginning of a smug smile, as if technology itself was conspiring to shut me down. Then, the television flickered to life and my phone screen appeared on the large display for everyone to see. "What are you doing?" my mother demanded. "This is not appropriate. We are having a family discussion, not a presentation." "You invited everyone here to discuss my character," I said calmly. "I think it is only fair that they have accurate information before making judgments." I navigated to my email and opened the contract confirmation from Meridian Pharmaceuticals. The document filled the screen corporate letterhead prominent at the top, legal language flowing down the page. I had redacted specific financial details and confidential clauses, but the key information was clearly visible. A 3-year consulting agreement, a total contract value of $30 million, my name and signature at the bottom. "This is my contract," I said, turning to face the room while the document remained on display behind me. $30 million over 3 years. Not a fantasy. Not something I made up for attention. A real agreement with a real company earned through 12 years of building my career from absolutely nothing. The murmuring started immediately. I watched relatives lean toward each other, whispering, glancing between the screen and me with expressions ranging from disbelief to dawning realization. Uncle Harold's mouth had fallen slightly open. Cousin Patricia was staring at the television, like it might suddenly reveal itself to be a hallucination. "Let me tell you about those 12 years," I continued. "When I graduated high school, there was supposed to be a college fund waiting for me. $15,000 that grandmother set aside before she died. That money was given to Lily instead. I was told to figure things out on my own." I swiped to the next document on my phone, a collection of records I had gathered over the past week. Scholarship letters, pay stubs from jobs I had held during college, bank statements showing the meagre balances I had survived on for years. I earned an 80% scholarship through grades and test scores. For the remaining 20% plus books, plus housing, plus food, I worked 2 part-time jobs. I started every morning at 5, at a diner near campus serving breakfast to truckers and early commuters. After classes, I worked retail until closing time. I slept 4 hours a night for 4 years. I ate instant noodles and peanut butter sandwiches because that was all I could afford. I drank library coffee because it was free. The room had gone very quiet. Even my mother seemed momentarily stunned into silence. While I was doing that, I said, my voice steady but carrying an edge I no longer tried to hide. Lily was living in a nice apartment that our parents paid for. She was driving a car they bought her. She was taking spring break trips with her sorority sisters, while I was picking up extra shifts just to afford my textbooks. I turned to look at Lily directly. Her face had gone pale, her eyes darting between me and our parents, as if searching for someone to intervene. While Lily was getting college funds, European vacations, and Hermes bags, I was surviving on instant noodles and library coffee. I was building a career one painful step at a time with no help, no support, and no acknowledgement from anyone in this family. I swiped to another screen showing a timeline I had created. My graduation date, my first job, my promotions, the companies I had worked with, the trajectory that had led from a desperate college student to a successful consultant commanding contracts worth tens of millions of dollars. This is what I built, alone, through years of sacrifice and hard work that no one in this room witnessed, because no one bothered to pay attention. Uncle Robert, who had been silent throughout the meeting, finally spoke. His voice was hesitant, confused. "Madison, why did we not know about any of this? Your career, your success, we had no idea. Your parents always said you were doing fine, that you had some kind of office job. They never mentioned anything like this." I turned to look at my mother. She was sitting rigidly on the sofa, her face a mask of barely controlled anger. My father had shrunk even further into himself, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. "That is an excellent question," I said. "Why did no one know? Why did the family believe I was struggling while I was actually building something remarkable?" I paused, letting the silence stretch. Because they never asked, because they did not care to know. Every phone call home for years was dominated by news about Lily. Her grades, her achievements, her problems. When I tried to share anything about my own life, I was interrupted or dismissed. Eventually, I stopped trying. I realized that this family had decided long ago who the successful daughter was going to be, and nothing I accomplished would ever change their minds. The murmuring had grown louder now. I could see relatives exchanging glances, reconsidering assumptions they had held for years. The narrative my parents had carefully constructed was beginning to crack. My mother tried to regain control. "This is all very dramatic, Madison, but it does not change the fact that you borrowed money from family members and never repaid it. Success does not excuse that kind of behaviour." Before I could respond, Aunt Ruth stood up again. She had been watching the entire exchange with an intensity that suggested she was building towards something. Now she turned to face Lily, directly, her expression hard. "That reminds me of something I've been meaning to ask." Her voice carried across the room with unexpected authority. "Lily, I heard a rumour recently that troubled me. Someone mentioned that you told people Madison stole money from you. Is that true?" The question hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. Every eye in the room shifted to Lily, who sat frozen in her armchair with an expression that flickered between shock and barely concealed panic. For a moment, she looked like a deer caught in headlights, completely unprepared for this sudden turn in the conversation. Then she laughed. It was a forced sound too high and too bright, the kind of laugh that immediately signals something is wrong. That is ridiculous. I never said anything like that. Madison is twisting things as usual. She is trying to make me look bad because she cannot stand that I have a good relationship with our family. But her voice wavered on the last few words, and I could see that not everyone in the room was convinced. Aunt Ruth certainly was not. She remained standing, her arms crossed, her gaze fixed on Lily with an intensity that made my sister visibly uncomfortable. "I did not hear this from Madison," Aunt Ruth said calmly. "I heard it from other family members. People who received messages claiming that Madison had borrowed money and was refusing to pay it back. Messages that came from you, Lily." "That is a lie." Lily's voice had gone shrill. "I never sent any messages like that. Madison is manipulating you. She has been planning this attack for weeks. Can you not see what she is doing?" I stepped forward, my phone still connected to the television. "Actually, I have evidence." The room went silent again as I navigated to a folder of screenshots that Samuel had helped me compile. One by one, I displayed them on the screen. Text messages and emails that relatives had forwarded to us during the investigation. Each one told the same story in slightly different words. The first was a text conversation between Lily and cousin Patricia. The messages showed Lily reaching out 2 years ago expressing concern about Madison. "I am worried about her," one message read. "She lost her job and is too proud to ask for help. If she reaches out to you, please do not judge her. She is really struggling." Patricia's response showed sympathy and a promise to help however she could. The second was an email exchange between Lily and Uncle Harold. In it, Lily mentioned that Madison had confided in her about financial troubles. "She made me promise not to tell anyone, but I think she might reach out to family for a loan. Please be kind to her. She is going through a hard time." The third was a Facebook message to a distant cousin sent just 6 months ago. "Madison has been having problems for a while now. Money issues, work issues. She puts on a brave face, but I know things are bad. Just wanted to give you a heads up in case she contacts you." Each message painted the same picture. Madison the failure, Madison the desperate borrower, Madison who was too proud to admit she needed help, but would eventually come asking for money. Lily had been laying the groundwork for years, priming family members to expect requests that would never actually come from me. "These messages were sent from your accounts," I said, turning to face Lily. "Your phone number, your email address, your Facebook profile. You told our entire family that I was struggling, that I had lost my job, that I would be asking for money. You set them up to believe a lie." Lily's face had gone white. She looked around the room, searching for support, but the expressions she encountered were no longer sympathetic. Confusion had replaced trust. Doubt had replaced loyalty. "This is fake," she stammered. "Madison fabricated these. She is a technology person. She could easily have made these up to frame me." Before I could respond, another voice cut through the tension. Uncle Robert, who had barely spoken a dozen words in family gatherings for as long as I could remember, slowly rose from his chair. He was a quiet man, the kind who preferred to observe rather than participate. But now his face was troubled, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who had been putting pieces together in his mind. "Lily," he said slowly, "you also told me that Madison was having financial troubles. About a year ago, you called me directly. You said Madison was embarrassed and did not want anyone to know, but she was about to lose her apartment. You said she had asked you to help her find someone who could lend her some money until she got back on her feet." The room held its breath. "I sent $2,000, Uncle Robert continued, "but I did not send it to Madison. You told me she was traveling and could not access her American accounts, so I should send it to you through Venmo and you would forward it to her." He paused, his eyes meeting Lily's with something between disappointment and accusation. "That money went to your Venmo account, Lily. Did Madison ever receive it?" Lily opened her mouth, but no words came out. For the first time in her life, she had no script to follow, no carefully prepared excuse, no tears that could save her. The evidence was piling up too fast, coming from too many directions. The family members she had manipulated were now the witnesses to her manipulation. I watched my parents' faces during this exchange. My mother sat rigid on the sofa, her expression cycling through disbelief, confusion, and something I had never seen directed at Lily before: genuine doubt. The absolute certainty she had always had in her younger daughter was cracking. My father looked like a man watching his entire understanding of the world collapse. He kept glancing between Lily and me, as if trying to reconcile the daughter he had always championed with the evidence now being presented. "Lily?" My mother said, her voice strained. "Is this true? Did you tell people Madison was borrowing money?" "No. I mean, yes, but not like that. I was trying to help. I thought Madison might need support, and I wanted family to be prepared to help her if she asked. I did not take any money. Uncle Robert is confused. Madison is confusing everyone." But the denials sounded hollow now. Too many people had come forward. Too many stories matched too perfectly. The web of lies Lily had spent years spinning was unraveling thread by thread, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Uncle Harold spoke up, his voice heavy with realization. "I sent $1,500 through Lily's Venmo too. She said the same thing. Madison was traveling, could not access her accounts. Needed me to send the money through Lily as an intermediary." "Same here," Cousin Patricia added quietly. $2,000 through Lily." The room erupted in murmurs. Family members were turning to each other, comparing notes, realizing that they had all been given the same story, all been directed to send money the same way. Through Lily. Always through Lily. Lily stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Her face was red, her eyes wild with a mixture of fury and desperation. The mask of the perfect daughter had shattered completely, and what remained was something raw and ugly. "This is insane," she screamed. "You are all turning against me because of her. She is the one who abandoned this family. She is the one who thinks she is better than everyone. And now you are believing her lies over me." No one responded. The silence was damning. Lily looked around the room one final time, searching for a single ally, a single sympathetic face. She found none. Even our mother could not meet her eyes. "Fine," Lily spat, her voice shaking with rage. "If she wants a war, she will get one." She grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door, shoving past relatives who scrambled to get out of her way. The front door slammed behind her with enough force to rattle the windows. The 2 days following the family meeting were strangely quiet. No calls from my parents, no messages from Lily, no updates from the relatives who had witnessed the confrontation. I tried to return to my normal routine, focusing on work and preparing for the Meridian contract's first major deliverable. But Lily's parting words echoed in my mind. If she wants a war, she will get one. I knew my sister well enough to understand that she did not make empty threats. She was planning something. I just did not know what. Tuesday morning started like any other. I woke early, made coffee, reviewed my notes for an upcoming client call. The sun was streaming through my apartment windows, and for a few peaceful hours, I almost forgot about the chaos of the previous weeks. Then my phone rang and everything changed. The caller ID showed a number I recognized immediately. It was the main line for my company's human resources department. A cold feeling settled in my stomach as I answered. "Madison Sharp speaking." "Ms. Sharp, this is Karen Chen from Human Resources. I apologize for calling so early, but we need to discuss an urgent matter. Do you have a few minutes?" Her tone was professional, but guarded, the kind of voice people use when they're about to deliver bad news. I sat down slowly, bracing myself. Of course. What is this about? We received a communication yesterday evening that has raised some concerns. An email was sent to our CEO and several members of the board of directors making serious allegations about your conduct. The email claims that you engaged in contract fraud and embezzlement during your previous consulting engagements. My heart stopped. For a moment, I could not breathe. Contract fraud, embezzlement. These were not minor accusations. These were the kinds of allegations that destroyed careers that followed people for the rest of their professional lives, that could result in criminal charges if anyone believed them. That is completely false, I managed to say. I have never engaged in any fraudulent activity. My record is spotless. There must be some mistake. We understand this may come as a shock, Ms. Sharp, and I want to be clear that no conclusions have been drawn. However, given the seriousness of the allegations and the fact that they were sent directly to our executive leadership, we are obligated to conduct a thorough investigation. What does that mean for my contract? There was a pause on the other end of the line. The silence told me everything I needed to know before she even spoke. We are asking you to temporarily step back from active work on the Meridian project while the investigation is conducted. This is standard protocol for allegations of this nature. It is not a termination, and it does not imply guilt. It is simply a precaution until we can verify the facts. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. 12 years of building my career, 12 years of sacrifice and sleepless nights and missed opportunities, and now some anonymous email could bring it all crashing down. Everything I had worked for was suddenly hanging by a thread, threatened by accusations I knew were lies. How long will this investigation take? I asked, forcing my voice to remain steady. We cannot give you a specific timeline at this point. Our internal team will be reviewing the claims and any evidence that can be gathered. We will keep you informed of developments. After the call ended, I sat motionless for a long time, staring at the wall. The shock gradually gave way to a burning anger. This was Lily. It had to be. 2 days after she stormed out of that family meeting, 2 days after her carefully constructed lies were exposed in front of everyone, she had struck back in the most devastating way possible. She could not hurt me financially, so she was trying to destroy my reputation instead. I called Samuel immediately. He answered on the second ring, and I explained the situation in a rush of words that probably made little sense, but he understood enough to grasp the severity. "Do not panic," he said firmly. "Accusations are just accusations until they are proven, and these will not be proven because they are not true. What we need to do now is find out where that email came from." "How do we do that?" "Your company's IT department should be able to trace the email's origin. Even anonymous accounts leave digital footprints. I will contact your HR representative and request that they share the technical details with me. As your attorney, I have standing to make that request, especially if we can frame this as potential harassment or defamation." Samuel worked fast. Within hours, he had established communication with my company's IT security team and requested a trace on the anonymous email. The waiting was agony. Every minute felt like an hour. I paced my apartment, unable to focus on anything, my mind cycling through worst-case scenarios. Late that afternoon, Samuel called back. His voice had a different quality now, something between satisfaction and barely contained excitement. "We found something. The anonymous email was sent from a newly created account with a generic username. But whoever created it made a critical mistake. When you set up most email accounts, you have the option to add a recovery email in case you forget your password. Most people use their primary personal email for this. And the recovery email associated with the anonymous account is lily.sharp@gmail.com. I closed my eyes, letting the information sink in. Lily had tried to destroy my career with an anonymous accusation, but she had been careless. In her rush to attack me, she had forgotten to cover her tracks. She had left a direct link back to herself, proof that she was the source of the malicious email. "This is evidence of harassment," Samuel continued. "Possibly defamation, depending on how we want to pursue it. And combined with everything else we have documented, the identity theft, the money she stole from relatives by impersonating you, this creates a very clear pattern of criminal behaviour." For the first time since that terrible phone call from HR, I felt something other than fear. Lily had overplayed her hand. She had been so desperate to hurt me that she had made a mistake that could expose her completely. But even with this evidence, the damage was not undone. My company was still investigating. My contract was still suspended. My reputation was still under a cloud of suspicion. As if to confirm my fears, my phone buzzed with a new email notification. The sender was my company's legal department. The subject line made my stomach clench. "RE contract status, under review, pending investigation." The week that followed was the longest of my life. Each day stretched into an eternity of waiting, checking my email, obsessively jumping every time my phone buzzed. The investigation was ongoing, and I had no way to speed it up or influence its outcome. All I could do was prepare for whatever came next and hope that the truth would be enough to save everything I had built. Samuel and I spent hours putting together a comprehensive defense. We compiled a complete timeline of my career, every project I had worked on, every client I had served, every deliverable I had produced. We gathered financial records showing clean transactions, proper invoicing, and transparent accounting. Most importantly, we documented everything we knew about the anonymous email, including the recovery address that linked it directly to Lily. By the end of the week, we had assembled a binder thick enough to rival a legal brief. It contained proof of my professional integrity and evidence of my sister's targeted harassment. If the company wanted facts, we would give them more facts than they knew what to do with. The meeting was scheduled for Friday morning at the corporate headquarters downtown. I arrived early, dressed in my most professional suit, my hair pulled back, my expression calm despite the storm raging inside me. Samuel met me in the lobby, equally polished, carrying a leather briefcase that held copies of all our documentation. "Remember," he said quietly as we waited for the elevator, "you have done nothing wrong. Everything they are about to see will confirm that. Stay composed, answer their questions directly, and let the evidence speak for itself." I nodded, grateful for his steady presence. I had faced difficult meetings before, tense negotiations, with demanding clients' presentations to skeptical executives. But nothing compared to the stakes of this moment. My entire career hung in the balance. The conference room on the executive floor was large and intimidating, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. 3 people were already seated at the long table when we entered. Karen Chen from Human Resources, looking more sympathetic than she had sounded on the phone. David Morrison, the Chief Legal Officer, his expression unreadable behind wire-rimmed glasses. And, at the head of the table, Margaret Wells, the CEO, who had personally approved my Meridian contract just a month ago. We took our seats across from them, and Margaret began without preamble. "Ms. Sharp, thank you for coming in. I want to start by saying that this meeting is not a tribunal. We are here to review the facts and make an informed decision about how to proceed. You have been a valuable member of our consulting team for 3 years, and we do not take these allegations lightly in either direction." "I appreciate that," I said, my voice steady, "and I appreciate the opportunity to address them directly. The email we received made serious claims about contract fraud and embezzlement," David Morrison said, consulting a document in front of him. "Before we discuss your response, I want to be clear about what was alleged. The sender claimed you had inflated billing hours on previous projects, accepted payments from competing firms, and falsified expense reports." Hearing the accusation spoken aloud was painful, but I kept my composure. None of those claims are true, and I have documentation to prove it. Samuel opened his briefcase and began distributing copies of our prepared materials. If you will direct your attention to the first section, you will find a complete timeline of Ms. Sharp's work history with this company. Every project, every deliverable, every client interaction. The second section contains financial records, billing statements, and expense reports for the same period. Everything has been verified against company records. The executives took several minutes to review the documents, flipping through pages, occasionally making notes. I watched their faces for any sign of their reaction, but they remained professionally neutral. "This is thorough," Margaret finally said, setting down the binder. "Very thorough. But the documentation of your work is only part of what we need to address. We also need to understand where this accusation came from and why." Samuel leaned forward. "That brings us to the third section of our materials. We have traced the anonymous email to its source. While the account itself was created recently and used a generic username, the sender made a critical error. The recovery email associated with the account belongs to Ms. Sharp's sister, Lily Sharp." Karen Chen's eyebrows rose. "Her sister sent this?" "We believe so, yes, and this is not an isolated incident." Samuel proceeded to explain the broader context, the family conflict, Lily's history of impersonating Madison to scam relatives, the identity theft, the pattern of harassment that had escalated over the past month. He presented the evidence methodically, the screenshots, the financial records, the email traces, building a picture of systematic targeting by a family member. The room was silent when he finished. Margaret Wells sat back in her chair, processing everything she had heard. "Ms. Sharp," she said slowly, "I have to be honest with you. When we received that email, I was concerned. The allegations were serious, and in today's environment, we cannot afford to ignore potential misconduct. But what you and your attorney have presented today tells a very different story." She glanced at her colleagues, then back at me. "We have worked with you for 3 years. In that time, you have consistently delivered exceptional results. Your clients praise you. Your colleagues respect you. One anonymous email sent by someone with an obvious personal vendetta is not going to change that." I felt something loosen in my chest, a tension I had been carrying for a week, finally beginning to release. "Your contract is reinstated effective immediately," Margaret continued. "You may resume work on the Meridian project starting Monday. We will note in our records that the investigation found no evidence of misconduct and that the allegations appear to have been part of a targeted harassment campaign." David Morrison spoke up. "However, we do have a recommendation. What your attorney has described sounds like a serious legal matter. Identity theft, fraud, defamation. These are not things that will resolve themselves. We strongly advise you to address this situation through proper legal channels, for your own protection and, frankly, for ours as well." "I understand," I said, "and I intend to do exactly that." The meeting concluded with handshakes and assurances. As Samuel and I rode the elevator back down to the lobby, I finally allowed myself to breathe. The immediate crisis was over. My career was intact. But the CEO's words echoed in my mind. "Handle your family situation legally." We stepped out onto the sidewalk, the noise of the city surrounding us, and I turned to Samuel with a resolve that had been building for weeks. "It is time to end this," I said. "All of it." Samuel understood exactly what I meant. We had been playing defense for weeks, reacting to Lily's attacks, cleaning up the messes she created, proving our innocence over and over again. It was exhausting and ultimately futile. As long as Lily believed she could continue hurting me without consequences, she would never stop. The only way to end this was to take the offensive, to expose everything she had done so completely that she would have no ground left to stand on. We spent the weekend assembling the final package. Samuel was meticulous, organising every piece of evidence into clear categories with explanatory notes that anyone could understand. The identity theft section included my credit report, showing the fraudulent account documentation of the charges and proof that the card was registered to my parents' address, where only Lily had access to my personal information. The loan scam section contained the fake emails sent to relatives' screenshots of the messages Lily had sent, priming them to expect requests for money, and Venmo receipts showing that every dollar had been deposited directly into her account. The plagiarism section included the official dismissal letter from her university, which Samuel had obtained through a public records request. And the workplace harassment section contained the anonymous email sent to my company, along with the technical trace proving it originated from an account linked to Lily's personal email. It was devastating. Laid out in black and white, the scope of Lily's deception was staggering. She had been systematically defrauding family members for years. She had stolen my identity. She had cheated her way through graduate school. And when her house of cards started to collapse, she had tried to destroy my career out of pure spite. This will end her assurance, Samuel said quietly as we reviewed the final document. Once the family sees this, there is no coming back. You need to be certain this is what you want. I thought about everything Lily had done, the birthday party humiliation, the threatening voicemails, the Facebook campaign to turn relatives against me, the fraudulent credit card that damaged my financial reputation, the $8,000 she had stolen by pretending to be me, the email that nearly cost me everything I had worked for. I am certain, I said, but there was one concern I could not shake. If I delivered this information myself, I would be seen as the aggressor. The family would say I was vindictive, that I was trying to destroy my sister, that I was tearing the family apart just like my mother had accused me of doing. No matter how justified my actions were, some people would only see a sister attacking a sister. I shared this concern with Samuel and he nodded thoughtfully. You need someone else to present the evidence, someone the family trusts, someone who cannot be accused of having a personal vendetta. The answer was obvious. Aunt Ruth. I called her that evening and explained what we had assembled. She listened without interruption, and when I finished, there was a long pause. Madison, she finally said, I have watched your mother favour Lily for 35 years. I have seen you pushed aside, ignored, blamed for things that were not your fault. I stayed silent because I did not want to cause conflict, and I will regret that for the rest of my life. If you are asking me to help set the record straight, the answer is yes. Send me everything. I emailed her the complete file that night, along with a list of every family member's email address that I had. Aunt Ruth was going to be the messenger, the neutral party, who could not be accused of personal bias. She would send the evidence to everyone and let the facts speak for themselves. The email went out Sunday evening. The subject line was simple and direct. The truth about our family. In her message, Aunt Ruth explained that she was sharing information that the family needed to see. She made clear that she had verified the documents herself and that everything was authentic. She asked people to read with an open mind and to consider what they were seeing before making judgments. Then she attached everything. Within an hour, my phone started buzzing with notifications. Text messages from cousins I had not spoken to in years, missed calls from aunts and uncles. The family was reacting, and from the fragments I could see the reaction was shock. Pure, undiluted shock. Uncle Harold texted Madison, I had no idea. I am so sorry I doubted you. Cousin Patricia called and left a voicemail. I feel sick. I sent money because I wanted to help you and it went to her. I cannot believe this. Uncle Robert sent a longer message. I just finished reading everything. This is worse than I imagined. Please know that you have my full support going forward. But the call I had been waiting for came just after 9 o'clock. My mother's number appeared on my screen, and I answered it with a calm I did not entirely feel. Madison. Her voice was barely recognizable. Gone was the cold authority, the dismissive tone, the absolute certainty that she was always right. She sounded broken. "I am here," I said. "Is this true, everything in that email, the credit card in your name, the money she took from everyone, the lies about you struggling? Is all of it true?" Every word, every document, all verified. There was silence on the other end, then a sound that might have been a sob. My mother was crying. In 35 years, I had never heard her cry. "Lily, she really did all of this, Joe." "Yes, Mum, she did." My father's voice came through in the background, muffled but audible. He was asking what was happening, what was wrong. My mother did not answer him. She just kept crying soft, broken sounds that told me her entire understanding of her family had just shattered. "I do not know what to say," she finally managed. "I do not know how to make sense of this." "You do not have to say anything right now. You just needed to know the truth." The call ended, shortly after my mother too, overwhelmed to continue. I sat in my apartment, phone in hand, feeling strangely empty. I had wanted them to know. I had needed them to see what Lily really was. But there was no satisfaction in hearing my mother break down, only a hollow ache for the family we might have been if things had been different. Then my phone rang again. Lily's number. I answered without speaking, and her voice exploded through the speaker, hysterical, barely coherent, choked with sobs and fury. "You destroyed me. You ruined everything. I will sue you. I will sue Aunt Ruth. I will sue everyone who had anything to do with this. You think you have won, but you have not. This is not over." Lily's threat echoed in my ears long after I ended the call. "Sue me. Sue Aunt Ruth. Sue everyone." The words were desperate, the ravings of someone who had lost control and was grasping at anything that might restore her power. But I knew better than to dismiss them entirely. Lily had already proven she was willing to go to extreme lengths when cornered. I needed to be prepared for whatever came next. I called Samuel first thing the next morning and relayed Lily's threats. He listened calmly, then let out a small laugh that held no humour. "Let her try," he said. "She has no legal standing whatsoever. Every piece of evidence in that email was obtained through legitimate means. The credit report came from your own authorised request. The screenshots were forwarded by the relatives themselves with their full knowledge and consent. The university dismissal letter is a public record. And the email trace was conducted by your company's IT department as part of an official investigation into harassment. So she cannot sue us for defamation or invasion of privacy or anything like that. Defamation requires proving that someone made false statements. Everything in that file is documented truth. You cannot be sued for telling the truth. As for privacy, Lily has no expectation of privacy regarding crimes she committed against other people. The relatives she scammed have every right to share evidence of that fraud with each other." I felt some of the tension leave my shoulders, but Samuel was not finished. "There is something else we need to discuss, Madison. Something I have been waiting to bring up until the immediate crisis was resolved." His tone had shifted, becoming more serious. I braced myself. "What Lily did to you, the credit card opened in your name, the debt run up using your identity, that is not just a civil matter between family members. Identity theft is a federal crime. If you choose to report this to the FBI, Lily could face serious criminal charges. We are talking about potential prison time." The words hit me like a physical blow. Prison. My sister in prison. Despite everything she had done, despite all the lies and theft and betrayal, the thought of Lily behind bars made something in my chest twist painfully. "I do not want that," I said quietly. "I know she has done terrible things. I know she deserves consequences. But prison. I cannot be the one who sends my own sister to prison." Samuel nodded slowly. "I understand. And that is your choice to make. But Madison, you need to think about what you do want. Lily is not going to change on her own. She has spent years building a life based on fraud and manipulation. Without real consequences, she will continue. Maybe not against you, but against someone else. I spent the next 2 days thinking about what Samuel had said. He was right. Lily would not stop unless she was forced to stop. But there had to be a middle ground, something between letting her escape without consequences and destroying her life completely. By Wednesday, I had made my decision. I asked Samuel to arrange a conference call with Lily. She agreed, reluctantly, probably because she was desperate to know what I was planning. When we connected, her voice was sullen and defensive, stripped of the hysteria from her earlier call. "What do you want, Madison? I want to offer you a choice," I said, keeping my voice calm and businesslike. "You have 2 options, and you need to decide right now which one you are going to take. I am not interested in your ultimatums." Then, let me explain what happens if you refuse to listen. I have documented evidence of identity theft, federal crime. If I report this to the FBI, you will be investigated. Given the paper trail we have assembled, you will almost certainly be charged, and, if convicted, you will go to prison. That is not a threat. That is simply the legal reality of your situation. Lily was silent. I could hear her breathing ragged and uneven. "Option 1, I continued. You publicly acknowledge to the entire family what you did. The money you stole by impersonating me. The credit card you opened in my name. All of it. And you commit to repaying every dollar you took from relatives. Uncle Harold, Aunt Ruth, Cousin Patricia, Uncle Robert. Everyone. You pay them back in full. I do not have that kind of money. Then you figure out how to get it. Payment plans, selling things, getting a job, whatever it takes, but you make it right. And option 2? Option 2 is that you refuse, in which case this file goes to the FBI tomorrow morning. I will also pursue a civil lawsuit for the damage to my credit and the harassment that nearly cost me my career. By the time the legal system is finished with you, you will have nothing left. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. You would really do that? Lily's voice was smaller now, the bravado completely gone. You would really send me to prison? I do not want to. Despite everything you have done, you are still my sister. But I will not let you continue hurting people without consequences. This is your only chance, Lily. Take it or leave it. More silence. Then finally, a single word. Fine. The formal acknowledgement happened via email, sent to the same list Aunt Ruth had used for the exposure. Lily admitted to creating fake email accounts to impersonate me, to directing family money into her own Venmo account, to opening a credit card in my name, without my knowledge or consent. The message was brief and clearly written under duress, but it was an admission nonetheless. She committed to repaying everyone she had defrauded. The response from the family was immediate and overwhelming. My phone buzzed continuously for the rest of the day with messages from relatives. Uncle Harold called to apologise for ever doubting me. I should have known something was wrong when the money went through Lily instead of directly to you. I just did not want to believe it. Cousin Patricia sent a long text expressing her shock and remorse. I said terrible things about you online. I believed Lily's story without question. I am so sorry, Madison. Aunt Ruth called simply to say she was proud of me. You handled this with more grace than I would have. You gave her a chance she did not deserve. Even relatives I had barely spoken to in years reached out with apologies and support. The narrative had completely reversed. I was no longer the heartless sister who abandoned her family. I was the victim who had finally found the courage to expose the truth. But there was one person I had not heard from. My father. That evening, a family gathering was held at my parents' house. I did not attend, but Aunt Ruth kept me informed. She said Lily showed up briefly, pale and hollow-eyed, and confirmed her acknowledgement in person before leaving abruptly. No one tried to stop her. No one offered comfort. She walked out the door alone, and for the first time in her life, not a single person in that family followed. I was sitting in my apartment that night, processing everything that had happened when my phone buzzed with a text message. The sender was my father. "Madison, can we talk, just us?" I stared at my father's message for a long time before responding. Just us. 2 words that carried so much weight. In 35 years, I could count on one hand the number of times my father and I had been alone together without my mother or Lily present. He had always been a shadow in the background of my childhood present, but passive loving in small gestures, but never brave enough to stand up for that love when it mattered. I typed back a simple response. Tomorrow, 2 o'clock, the coffee shop on Maple Street. It was a place midway between Chicago and Ohio neutral ground where neither of us would have the advantage of familiar territory. I chose it deliberately. Whatever conversation we were about to have, it needed to happen on equal footing. The drive the next day felt longer than it should have. My mind kept cycling through possible scenarios, things he might say, things I might say in return. Part of me wanted to refuse the meeting entirely to protect myself from whatever new disappointment might be waiting. But another part, the part that still remembered a single cupcake on a forgotten birthday and an envelope of cash slipped across a table, needed to hear what he had to say. I arrived early and chose a table in the corner where we could talk without being overheard. The coffee shop was quiet on a weekday afternoon, only a few other customers scattered around the room absorbed in their laptops and phones. I ordered a cup of tea and waited. My father walked in at exactly 2 o'clock. The first thing I noticed was how much older he looked. It had only been a few weeks since the birthday party, but he seemed to have aged a decade. His shoulders were hunched, his hair greyer than I remembered his face, lined with exhaustion and something deeper, guilt maybe, or grief. He spotted me in the corner and made his way over slowly, as if each step required conscious effort. He sat down across from me without ordering anything. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. We just looked at each other, 2 people who shared blood, but had never really known how to be family. "Thank you for coming," he finally said. His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "You asked to talk, so talk." He nodded, accepting the coldness in my tone without protest. "I deserve that. I deserve worse than that." He took a shaky breath. "Madison, I failed you. I have always known it. From the time you were a little girl, I knew what your mother was doing was wrong. I saw how she treated you differently from Lily. I saw how she ignored your achievements and criticized your choices, and made you feel like you did not matter. And I did nothing. I stood by and let it happen because I was too weak to fight her." I did not respond. There was nothing to say. He was telling me things I already knew, things I had lived through every day of my childhood. "I want you to understand something," he continued. "It was not because I did not love you. I loved you, Madison. I still love you. You were my firstborn, and there were so many times I wanted to protect you, to stand up for you, to tell your mother that she was being unfair. But every time I tried, she would shut me down. She would twist my words, make me feel like I was the one being unreasonable. After a while, I just stopped trying. I convinced myself that staying quiet was the best way to keep the peace, to hold the family together. I told myself that you were strong enough to handle it on your own." His voice cracked on the last words, and I saw tears forming in his eyes. "But that was not fair to you. You should not have had to be strong. You were a child. You deserved a father who would fight for you, and I was not that father. I am sorry, Madison. I am so sorry." I sat in silence, processing his words. The apology was long overdue, and part of me wanted to accept it, to let go of decades of resentment and just move forward. But forgiveness is not that simple. Words do not erase years of neglect. "There is something else," my father said, his voice dropping even lower. "Something I have never told anyone. When your mother decided to give your college fund to Lily, I fought her on it. For the first and only time in our marriage, I actually pushed back. I told her it was wrong that you had just as much right to that money as Lily did, that grandmother had wanted both of you to be taken care of equally. I felt something shift inside me, a flicker of surprise breaking through the numbness. She would not listen. She had already made up her mind. Lily needed it more, she said. Lily was struggling. Lily was the priority, the same arguments she always made. He paused, his hands trembling on the table. So, I did something behind her back. When the fund was transferred, I held back $5,000. I put it in a separate account that she did not know about. I was planning to give it to you when you needed it most, when you were struggling in college and had no one else to turn to. My breath caught in my throat. $5,000. It was not a fortune, but for a college student working double shifts just to survive, it would have been life-changing. It would have meant fewer hours at the diner, more time for studying, maybe even a chance to take an unpaid internship that could have accelerated my career. What happened to it? I asked, my voice barely audible. My father's face crumpled with shame. Your mother found out. She went through our bank statements and discovered the separate account. She was furious. She accused me of betraying her, of undermining her decisions, of caring more about you than about the family. She demanded that I use the money to pay off some credit card debt that Lily had accumulated. He could not meet my eyes. And I did it. I gave in, just like I always gave in. I told myself that I would find another way to help you, that I would make it up to you somehow. But the years kept passing, and I never had the courage to try again. Tears were rolling down my cheeks now, hot and silent. I did not wipe them away. That money I gave you at the coffee shop when you were 19, he continued. The $2,000. That was not from any account your mother knew about. I saved it over 2 years from my own pocket, skipping lunches, cutting back on things I wanted, putting aside a little bit at a time whenever I could. It was all I could manage without her noticing. I know it was not enough. I know nothing I did was ever enough. But I wanted you to have something, anything, that showed you I had not completely given up on you. I sat there, tears streaming down my face, feeling like the ground beneath me had shifted. All these years, I had believed my father was simply indifferent, that he had chosen my mother and Lily over me without a second thought. But the truth was more complicated. He had loved me. He had tried in his own small cowardly way to help me. But he had never been strong enough to follow through, never brave enough to protect what he wanted to give me. I forgive you, Dad, I said finally, my voice thick with emotion. I forgive you for being weak. I forgive you for not fighting harder. I forgive you for all the times you could have stood up for me and chose not to. He looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. But I cannot forget. I cannot pretend that the past did not happen, that the damage was not done. You chose the path of least resistance, and I paid the price for that choice. Forgiveness does not erase that. He nodded slowly, accepting my words without argument. For a long moment we sat in silence, the weight of decades hanging between us. Then he spoke again, his voice trembling. Can we try again? Slowly. I know I do not deserve another chance. I know I have given you every reason to walk away and never look back. But if there is any part of you that is willing to try, I promise I will be different. I will be the father I should have been all along. I looked at him, this broken old man who had failed me in so many ways, but had also loved me in the only way he knew how. I did not answer immediately. I never gave my father a direct answer that day. I told him I needed time, that too much had happened for me to make promises I was not sure I could keep. He accepted this with the quiet resignation of a man who knew he was lucky to get even that much. We parted with an awkward handshake that felt insufficient for the weight of our conversation, and I drove back to Chicago with his words echoing in my mind. A week passed. I threw myself back into work, grateful for the distraction of the Meridian project. The contract was proceeding smoothly, and my colleagues treated me with renewed respect after the company had cleared my name so decisively. But the family situation lingered in the background of every thought, unresolved and exhausting. I was not prepared for what happened next. It was a Saturday evening, and I was making dinner in my small kitchen when the intercom buzzed. I was not expecting anyone. I pressed the button and asked who was there, and the voice that answered made me freeze. "Madison, it is your mother. Please, I need to talk to you." For a long moment, I stood motionless, my hand still on the intercom. My mother had never visited my apartment. In all the years I had lived in Chicago, she had never once made the trip to see where I lived, how I had built my life, what I had accomplished on my own. And now, she was here unannounced, asking to be let in. Part of me wanted to refuse, to tell her to go away, that she had lost the right to show up at my door demanding conversations. But another part, the part that had spent decades trying to understand why she could never love me, the way she loved Lily, needed to hear what she had to say. I buzzed her in. When I opened my apartment door, the woman standing in the hallway was almost unrecognizable. My mother had always been impeccably put together. Her hair styled her clothes, pressed her makeup flawless. The woman before me now looked like she had not slept in days. Her eyes were swollen and red from crying. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore a simple sweater and jeans, clothes I had never seen her wear in public. She looked exhausted, broken, like someone who had finally run out of the energy required to maintain her carefully constructed facade. "Thank you for letting me in," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I stepped aside without a word and gestured toward the living room. She entered slowly, looking around at my apartment as if seeing a foreign country. She took in the modest furniture, the framed prints on the walls, the small kitchen where my half-prepared dinner sat abandoned on the counter. I wondered what she thought of it, this life I had built without her help, but I did not ask. She sat on the edge of my sofa, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I took the armchair across from her, maintaining distance. Whatever she had come to say, I was not going to make it easy for her. "I do not know where to begin," she said after a long silence. "Then, maybe you should not have come." She flinched at the coldness in my voice, but did not argue. "You are right. I probably should not have. You have every reason to hate me, Madison. Every reason to never want to see me again. What I did to you, how I treated you your entire life, it was wrong. I knew it was wrong, even while I was doing it. But I could not stop myself." I waited, saying nothing. I have been thinking about it constantly since everything came out about Lily, trying to understand why I did what I did, why I always chose her over you, why I gave her everything and left you with nothing. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "I finally understand, and the truth is worse than I ever imagined." She took a shaky breath before continuing. "You know that my mother left when I was young. What you do not know is how it happened. I was 10 years old. I came home from school one day and she was gone. No warning, no goodbye. She had run off with another man, someone she had been seeing behind my father's back. She left a note saying she was not cut out to be a mother, that she needed to live her own life, that I would be better off without her." I had heard fragments of this story before, whispered references to my grandmother's abandonment, but I had never heard the details, never understood how deep the wound went. I spent my entire childhood waiting for her to come back. Every time the phone rang, every time someone knocked on the door, I thought it might be her, but she never came. She started a new family, with that man had other children, and never looked back. I was not worth staying for. I was not worth remembering. Her voice cracked and she paused to compose herself. When Lily was born, something happened that I did not expect. She looked exactly like my mother. The same eyes, the same smile, the same expressions. It was like looking at a ghost. And from that moment, something inside me became terrified that she would leave me too. That one day I would come home and she would be gone, just like my mother was gone. The fear was irrational. She was just a baby, but I could not shake it. I felt something shift in my chest, a crack in the wall I had built around myself. I thought if I gave Lily everything, if I made her feel completely loved and supported, she would never want to leave. She would never abandon me the way my mother did. I poured all of my energy into keeping her close, making her happy, making sure she never had any reason to walk away from me. She looked at me with eyes full of anguish. But you, Madison, you were different. You were strong from the very beginning, independent, self-sufficient. Even as a little girl, you did not need me the way Lily seemed to need me. You could take care of yourself. And some twisted part of my mind decided that meant you would be fine, that you did not require the same attention, the same love, the same investment. The tears were flowing freely now down both our faces. I told myself I was being practical. I told myself I was doing what was best for both of you. But the truth is, I was so consumed by my fear of losing Lily that I sacrificed you without even realizing what I was doing. I pushed you away because you reminded me that strength exists, that people can survive without being smothered with attention. And that terrified me because it meant Lily might not need me either. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. I was so afraid of losing Lily that I lost you instead. I spent 35 years trying to prevent one daughter from abandoning me, and in the process I abandoned the other one completely. And now I have lost them both. Lily is gone, and she was never really the person I thought she was. And you, the daughter I neglected, the daughter I failed. In every possible way, you built a life without me. A successful, beautiful life that I had no part in creating. She looked up at me, her face ravaged by grief and regret. I created a monster, Madison. I gave Lily so much that she never learned how to be a real person. She never learned consequences. She never learned empathy. She learned that the world owed her everything, and when reality did not match that expectation, she became someone capable of terrible things. That is my fault. All of it is my fault. The room was silent, except for the sound of her crying. I sat frozen in my chair, overwhelmed by what I had just heard. For decades, I had believed my mother simply did not love me, that there was something fundamentally wrong with me that made me unworthy of her affection. But the truth was far more complicated. Her failure as a mother to me was rooted in her own trauma, her own unhealed wounds, her own desperate attempt to prevent a repeat of the abandonment that had shattered her childhood. It did not excuse what she had done. It did not undo the damage, but it explained something I had never understood. "Can you ever forgive me, Madison?" she asked through her tears. I did not answer my mother that night. I could not. The weight of everything she had confessed was too heavy to process in a single conversation. After she finished speaking, I simply told her that I needed time, that I was not ready to give her an answer, that she should go home and let me think. She accepted this without argument, rising from my sofa with the slow movements of someone carrying an invisible burden. At the door, she paused and looked back at me one last time. "Whatever you decide, Madison, I will accept it. I have no right to ask for anything from you. I just needed you to know the truth." Then she was gone, and I was alone with my thoughts. The days that followed were some of the most difficult of my life, not because of any external crisis, but because of the internal reckoning that demanded my attention. I had spent 35 years building a narrative about my family, a story that cast me as the forgotten daughter, and my parents as the villains who had chosen my sister over me. That story had helped me survive. It had given me the anger I needed to push through the hard times, the determination to prove everyone wrong, the armor that protected me from hoping for love that would never come. But now that story was more complicated. My father had tried to help me in his own weak way. My mother's cruelty had been rooted in her own childhood trauma. Lily had been shaped by forces she did not fully control. None of this excused what they had done, but it made them human in ways I had never allowed myself to see. I spent hours walking through the city, letting the noise and motion of Chicago clear my head. I sat in coffee shops and stared out windows without really seeing anything. I replayed memories from my childhood, searching for moments I might have missed, times when love had been offered in forms I was too hurt to recognize. I remembered the cupcake my father brought me on my forgotten 10th birthday. I remembered the $2,000 he had given me in secret when I was 19. I remembered Aunt Ruth's warm hugs and whispered encouragements. I even remembered moments with my mother, rare flickers of tenderness that had been overshadowed by years of neglect. A time when I was sick with the flu, and she sat by my bed reading to me. A birthday card she had written when I turned 16 with words that seemed genuine even though they were quickly forgotten in the chaos of Lily's demands. These moments did not erase the pain. They did not balance the scales. But they reminded me that the people who had hurt me were not monsters. They were flawed, damaged human beings who had made terrible choices and caused real harm. And I had to decide what I wanted to do with that knowledge. By the end of the week, I had made my decision. I sat down at my computer and opened a new email. I typed my parents' addresses into the recipient field and stared at the blank message for a long time before I began to write. Mum and Dad, I have spent the past week thinking about everything that has happened and everything you have said to me. I have thought about my childhood, about the choices you made, about the person I became because of those choices. And I have come to a decision. I forgive you, not because you deserve it. What you did to me was wrong, and no explanation or apology can undo the damage. I grew up feeling invisible, unloved, and unworthy. I spent decades believing there was something fundamentally broken inside me that made me impossible to love. Those wounds will never fully heal, but I forgive you anyway, because I deserve peace. I am tired of carrying the weight of your failures on my shoulders. I am tired of letting the pain of the past poison my present. Forgiveness is not a gift I am giving you. It is a gift I am giving myself. That said, I need you to understand something. Forgiveness does not mean reconciliation. I am not going to pretend that we can go back to being a normal family because we never were a normal family to begin with. Whatever relationship we have going forward needs to start from zero. No expectations, no obligations, no assumptions based on what came before. Just honesty. If you want to be part of my life, you will have to earn that place. Slowly, carefully, one genuine interaction at a time. I am not promising anything. I am only leaving the door open a crack. What happens next is up to you. I will not be visiting for holidays. I will not be attending family gatherings where I am expected to perform the role of the dutiful daughter. If and when we see each other, it will be on my terms in settings where I feel safe and respected. This is the best I can offer. Take it or leave it. I read through the message 3 times before hitting send. Then I sat back in my chair and let out a breath I had been holding for what felt like years. There was one more decision to make. One more relationship to address. Lily. I thought about my sister, about the girl she had been, and the woman she had become. I thought about the crimes she had committed, the lies she had told, the damage she had caused to me, and to so many others. I thought about whether there was any possibility of redemption, any path back to something resembling sisterhood. The answer was no. Some bridges need to stay burned. Lily had crossed lines that could never be uncrossed. She had stolen my identity, defrauded. Our relatives tried to destroy my career with false accusations. These were not the actions of someone who made a mistake and wanted to do better. These were the actions of someone who saw other people as tools to be used and discarded. I would not pursue legal action against her. That had been my promise, and I intended to keep it. But I would also not have her in my life. No contact, no communication, no second chances. She had used up every ounce of grace I had to give, and there was nothing left. I did not write Lily an email. I simply blocked her number, blocked her social media accounts, and moved on. She did not deserve the closure of a formal goodbye. She did not deserve any more of my energy or attention. The response from my parents came 2 days later. It was brief and humble. They accepted my terms without argument. They understood that this was their last chance, and they were grateful I was willing to give them even that much. My mother wrote that she was starting therapy to address the trauma she had carried since childhood. My father wrote that he was learning to speak up, to be the man he should have been all along. Whether they would follow through remained to be seen. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I was in control of my relationship with them. I had set boundaries. I had defined the terms, and whatever happened next would be my choice. I felt lighter than I had in years. The burden I had carried for so long was finally beginning to lift. A week later, a letter arrived in my mailbox. The return address was Aunt Ruth's. Inside was a handwritten note on soft blue paper. The words made my heart skip a beat. "Madison, there is something I should have told you years ago." I carried the letter to my reading chair by the window, handling it with a care that surprised me. Something about the weight of the envelope, the careful handwriting on the front, told me this was not an ordinary piece of mail. Aunt Ruth had taken the time to write by hand rather than send an email or text. Whatever she needed to say, she had wanted to say it properly. I settled into the chair and opened the envelope, slowly pulling out several pages of soft blue stationery covered in Ruth's neat cursive. The afternoon light streamed through the window as I began to read. "Dear Madison, I have started this letter 100 times over the years and never had the courage to finish it. But after everything that has happened, after watching you stand up for yourself with more grace and strength than anyone I have ever known, I think you deserve to finally hear the truth. Not the truth about Lily or your parents. You know all of that now. This is a different truth. This is about me and about you and about something I should have told you a long time ago. When you were 12 years old, I went to your parents with a proposal. I had been watching the way your mother treated you for years, and it broke my heart. I saw how she ignored your accomplishments while celebrating every small thing Lily did. I saw how she criticized you for things that were not your fault. I saw a bright, beautiful little girl slowly learning to make herself invisible, because being seen only brought pain. I asked your parents to let you live with me for part of each year. I had a spare bedroom. I lived close enough that you could still see your family whenever you wanted. I thought if I could give you a safe space, a place where you were seen and valued and loved for exactly who you were, it might make a difference. I thought I could be the refuge you needed. Your parents refused. Your mother was furious that I had even suggested it. She said I was overstepping, that I had no right to interfere in how she raised her children, that it would look bad to the rest of the family if one daughter was sent away to live with an aunt. Your father, as always, said nothing. He just sat there while your mother shouted at me, his eyes fixed on the floor. I left that day feeling like I had failed you. I had tried to help and been shut down completely. Your mother made it clear that if I pushed the issue, she would cut me off. I would not be welcome at family gatherings. I would not be allowed to see you or Lily or anyone else. And that is where I made my mistake, Madison. I was afraid. I was afraid that if I fought harder, I would lose access to you entirely. I told myself that being present in your life occasionally was better than not being present at all. I told myself that as long as I was around, I could at least offer you small moments of kindness, small reminders that someone cared. But I should have done more. I should have spoken up, even if it meant consequences. I should have told you that what was happening in your house was wrong, that you deserved better, that the way your mother treated you had nothing to do with your worth as a person. I stayed silent because I was scared, and my silence made me complicit in what happened to you. I am sorry, Madison. I am so deeply sorry. But I need you to know something else. something I have never told you. I watched you. All these years I watched you from a distance, not in a strange way, just in the way that someone who loves you cannot help but pay attention to your life, even when they are not directly part of it. I saw you work 2 jobs in college while your sister lived off your parents' generosity. I saw you graduate with honours walking across that stage with no family in the audience, because your mother had decided Lily's sorority event was more important. I was there, Madison. I sat in the back row where you could not see me, and I watched you receive your diploma with tears running down my face. I saw you move to Chicago and start your career from nothing. I followed your professional achievements through industry newsletters and LinkedIn updates. I watched you build something remarkable piece by piece, year by year, while your family remained oblivious to who you were becoming. I saw you become the woman you are today. Strong, independent, successful, not because of your family, but in spite of them. I always saw you, Madison, even when you thought no one was watching, even when you felt completely alone in the world. I was there, paying attention, cheering you on, in my heart, even if I was too cowardly to say it out loud. You are the strongest person I know, not because you never struggled, not because everything came easy, but because you faced impossible odds and refused to let them break you. You took every disadvantage, every obstacle, every moment of neglect and cruelty, and you transformed it into fuel for your own success. I know that knowing I was watching does not undo the loneliness you felt. It does not change the fact that I should have done more, said more, been more present in ways that actually mattered. But I hope it helps a little to know that you were never truly invisible. At least one person in your family saw you for who you really were and loved you unconditionally, even from a distance. You do not need their approval to be worthy, Madison. You never did. Your worth was never dependent on whether your mother noticed your achievements or your father spoke up in your defense. You are worthy simply because you exist, simply because you are you. I hope that in the years to come we can build the relationship I always wished we had. I would like to be the aunt I should have been all along, if you will let me. With all my love, Ruth. I set the letter down on my lap and stared out the window at the city skyline. The tears came quietly rolling down my cheeks in steady streams. But for the first time, in as long as I could remember, they were not tears of pain or grief or anger. They were tears of relief. I had spent 35 years believing I was completely alone, believing that no one in my family had ever seen me, ever valued me, ever cared about what happened to me. But I was wrong. Aunt Ruth had been there all along, watching from the shadows, loving me in the only way she felt she could. It was not enough. I knew that. Her presence at my graduation, her silent observation of my career, could never replace the active support and intervention I had needed as a child. She had admitted her own failures in the letter, her own cowardice, her own complicity in what had happened to me. But it was something. It was proof that I had not been entirely forgotten. That at least one person had recognized my worth, even when I could not see it myself. I reached for paper and pen. I had letters to write, one to Aunt Ruth thanking her for finally telling me the truth and accepting her offer to build something real between us. And one to my parents, not to revise the boundaries I had set, but to acknowledge what I had learned and to take one small step forward on the long road ahead. The letter I wrote to my parents that night was different from the email I had sent before. It was softer, more reflective, written by someone who had finally found peace with her own story. Mum and Dad, I have been thinking about what you both shared with me, the confessions you made, the apologies you offered. I have also been thinking about the years that came before the childhood I had the woman I became because of, and in spite of everything that happened in our family. I want you to know that I do not hate you. I spent a long time thinking that I did, or at least that I should. But hate takes energy, and I have decided to spend my energy on things that bring me joy, instead of things that drain me. I forgive you, both of you, not because the past has been erased or because the wounds have fully healed, but because forgiveness is the only way forward that does not keep me trapped in what came before. That said, I need you to understand that forgiveness and closeness are not the same thing. We cannot simply pick up where we left off, because where we left off was not a healthy place. If we are going to have a relationship, it needs to be built on something new, something honest, something that does not require me to pretend that everything is fine when it is not. I need time to learn who I am without trying to earn your love. For 35 years, so much of my energy went towards seeking approval that never came. I need to discover what my life looks like when that is no longer the driving force. I need to learn to love myself first before I can figure out how to love you in return. This is not goodbye. It is not a door closing forever. It is simply a request for space and patience while I figure out how to be your daughter in a way that does not cost me my own well-being. I hope you can understand that. Madison. I mailed the letter the next day, and then I turned my attention to the life I had built for myself. The Meridian contract consumed most of my professional focus over the months that followed. It was challenging work, the kind that demanded every skill I had developed over 12 years in the industry. But it was also deeply satisfying. Every successful deliverable, every positive client review, every milestone achieved felt like proof that I had earned my place in this world through my own effort and talent. My apartment became a true sanctuary. I filled it with small comforts, things that made me happy, without needing to justify their cost or explain their purpose to anyone. Fresh flowers on the kitchen table every week, a soft blanket for reading on the sofa, art prints that spoke to something deep inside me. For the first time, I was building a space that reflected who I was, rather than who I thought I should be. And then there was Samuel. He started visiting on weekends, driving up from his office in the city to spend time with me. At first, it was just casual two old friends reconnecting over shared meals and long conversations. We would cook dinner together in my small kitchen, laughing at our mistakes and celebrating our successes. We would take walks through the neighborhood as the seasons changed, talking about everything and nothing. Somewhere along the way, friendship became something more. I did not notice the exact moment it happened. It was gradual, like the sun rising so slowly that you do not realize it is morning until the whole sky is bright. One day, I looked at Samuel across my kitchen table and realized that I loved him. Not in the desperate, approval-seeking way I had loved before, but in a quiet, steady way that felt like coming home. For the first time in my life, I understood that I could open my heart without fear of being destroyed. Samuel knew my history. He had seen me at my worst and helped me fight my way back. And he was still here, still choosing me, still showing up every weekend with a bottle of wine and a smile that made everything feel possible. A year passed. The Meridian contract reached its first major milestone, and the results exceeded everyone's expectations. My work was recognized across the industry, and I received an invitation that took my breath away. I had been selected to receive an award at the annual Pharmaceutical Marketing Conference, an honor given to the consultant who had made the most significant impact on the field that year. The ceremony was held in a grand ballroom in downtown Chicago. Hundreds of professionals filled the room, industry leaders and rising stars and everyone in between. I wore a dress I had chosen myself, deep blue and elegant, the kind of outfit I would never have been confident enough to wear in my old life. Aunt Ruth flew in for the occasion. She sat at the table reserved for my guests, looking proud and happy and slightly overwhelmed by the scale of the event. Samuel was beside her, handsome, in a dark suit, his hand reaching for mine under the table as the ceremony began. Just before I was called to the stage, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my mother, 3 words that carried more weight than any speech she had ever given. Proud of you. It was not perfect. It was not the effusive praise I had craved as a child. But it was real, and it was more than I had ever received from her before. I stared at those 3 words for a long moment, feeling something shift inside me. When I returned to the table after checking my phone, there was a small arrangement of flowers waiting. No card, no signature, but I knew they were from my father. He had sent them without needing recognition or credit. It was a small gesture, but it told me he was trying in his own quiet way. My name was announced, and I walked to the stage amid applause. The lights were bright, the audience a sea of faces I mostly did not recognize. But in the crowd, I could see Aunt Ruth wiping her eyes with a tissue. I could see Samuel beaming with unconcealed pride. And somewhere out there, I knew my parents were thinking of me, even if they were not in the room. I accepted the award and spoke briefly about my career, about the work that had brought me to this moment, about the importance of persistence and believing in yourself when no one else does. But as I looked out at the audience, I realized something that mattered more than any professional achievement. I did not need this award to feel worthy. I did not need the applause or the recognition or even the $30 million contract. I had spent my whole life seeking approval from people who were incapable of giving it freely. And now, standing on that stage, I finally understood that my worth had never depended on them. Lily was gone. She had moved away after the exposure-cutting contact with everyone in the family. I did not know where she was, and I found that I did not need to know. She was no longer a threat, no longer a presence in my life, no longer someone whose actions could hurt me. I wished her no harm, but I also wished her nothing. She simply did not exist in my world anymore. After the ceremony, Samuel and Aunt Ruth and I went to dinner at a quiet restaurant overlooking the lake. We talked and laughed and celebrated not just the award, but everything that had led to it. The struggles, the victories, the long journey from invisible daughter to the woman I had become. Later that night, alone in my apartment with the award sitting on my bookshelf, I stood by the window and looked out at the city lights. A year ago, I had been trapped in a web of family dysfunction, fighting for my reputation, unsure if I would ever escape the shadow of the people who had failed to love me properly. Now I was free. Not because my parents had changed, though they were trying in their small ways. Not because Lily had been punished, though she had faced consequences for her actions. Not because anyone had finally given me the approval I had sought for 35 years. I was free because I had changed. I had stopped seeking validation from people who could not provide it. I had learned to love myself without conditions. I had built a life that belonged entirely to me. For the first time in my life, I finally felt free. Not because they changed, but because I did. And so, Madison's story comes to an end. But in many ways, her real life was just beginning, the moment she stopped seeking approval from people who were never capable of giving it freely. She learned something that took 35 years to understand, something that many of us spend our entire lives trying to grasp. Your worth is not determined by the people who failed to see it. Your value does not decrease because someone was too broken to recognize it. And sometimes the family you build for yourself through love, trust, and mutual respect is far stronger than the one you were born into. Madison's journey reminds us that it is never too late to set boundaries. It is never too late to demand the respect you deserve. It is never too late to stop being invisible and start being seen on your own terms. She did not win by destroying her sister or seeking revenge against her parents. She won by choosing herself, by refusing to let their failures define her future, by finding the courage to say enough is enough and meaning it. Her victory was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet and powerful, the kind of victory that comes from finally loving yourself after a lifetime of being taught that you were not worthy of love. How many of us have felt invisible in our own families? How many of us have watched a sibling or another family member receive the love, the attention, the investment we desperately craved? How many of us have been told directly through cruel words or indirectly through years of neglect that we were simply not worth the effort? Madison's story is not just her story. It is the story of every overlooked daughter, every forgotten son, every child who grew up feeling like a stranger in their own home. It is the story of everyone who was made to feel small by the very people who should have lifted them up and helped them shine. But here is the truth that Madison discovered, and the truth I hope you carry with you long after this story ends. You do not need their approval. You never did. The people who failed to love you properly were fighting their own battles, carrying their own unhealed wounds, repeating painful patterns they never learned to break. Their inability to see your worth says everything about their limitations and nothing about your value as a human being. If this story touched your heart today, if you saw yourself in Madison's struggle, if you found hope in her journey from invisible daughter to a woman who finally felt free, then I invite you to share your own experience in the comments below. Tell me about a time when you felt unseen by the people who should have loved you most. Tell me how you found your own path to freedom. Tell me what you would say to Madison if you could speak to her right now. Your stories matter deeply. Your voice deserves to be heard. This community we are building together is a place where everyone is seen, everyone is valued, and no one has to feel invisible ever again. If you have not already, please subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another story like this one. Every subscription helps us reach more people who need to hear these messages of hope and healing. Every comment, every like, every share helps someone else feel less alone in their struggle. Thank you for listening until the very end. Thank you for being part of this journey. And always remember, you are worthy of love exactly as you are. You always have been, and you always will be. Until next time.